Section 5. Winter loosens its grip so gradually that no one notices the exact day it ends. The snow retreats into scattered patches beneath the pines. Streams begin speaking more loudly as fresh meltwater rushes downhill. Tiny green shoots push through the dark soil, carrying the unmistakable scent of damp earth awakening after months of quiet sleep. The camp feels lighter. People smile more often. Children wander, farther from the fire, chasing each other between budding trees, while their laughter echoes through the valley. The child has grown. No longer carried everywhere, they now walk confidently beside the adults, asking questions with curious eyes that rarely remain still for long. Every animal track deserves investigation. Every unusual stone must be turned over. Every bird feather becomes a treasure. You cannot help smiling. Curiosity is its own kind of survival. One morning, the camp prepares for a familiar journey. The nearby berry patches will not ripen for several more weeks, so families travel toward a broad river where fish gather each spring. They have made this journey countless times before. The route feels almost sacred. Everyone knows where the trail bends around the old oak. Everyone knows which fallen log crosses the marsh. Everyone knows the clearing where deer sometimes graze before sunrise. Memory serves as the only map. The walk is unhurried. You hear leather sandals brushing against dry grass. Birds call from hidden branches overhead. The smell of crushed wild garlic rises beneath your feet each time someone steps across the forest floor. The river finally appears, wide, clear, patient. Its surface sparkles beneath the morning sun while gentle waves carry drifting branches toward lands no one in this camp has ever seen. Children immediately kneel beside the water. They laugh while skipping flat stones across the surface. One particularly smooth pebble bounces 6 times before disappearing beneath the current. An impressive achievement, at least according to every child watching. Nearby adults quietly begin weaving temporary fish traps from flexible willow branches. Others sharpen bone hooks polished smooth through years of careful use. Nothing is hurried. The river has waited thousands of years. It can wait another hour. You notice the child sitting beside an older grandfather. The old man points toward fish swimming through the shallows. He says nothing for several moments. Instead, he waits. Eventually, the child notices a faint shadow gliding beneath the surface. Only then does the old man nod with quiet approval. Some lessons arrive through silence. Modern teachers might call it observation. These people simply call it growing up. Anthropologists believe children in hunter-gatherer societies often learned by watching skilled adults rather than through constant instruction. Knowledge flowed naturally through shared work, patient repetition, and daily life itself. The forest was their classroom. The seasons were their calendar. Experience wrote every lesson. As afternoon sunlight warms the riverbank, the child helps gather smooth stones for cooking. Each stone is carefully chosen. Not every rock survives intense heat. Some crack unexpectedly. Others explode with startling force if hidden moisture remains trapped inside. People learned these lessons through generations of quiet trial and careful memory. No one forgets twice. You wonder how many discoveries disappeared forever because no one survived long enough to teach them. History keeps many such secrets. The day passes peacefully. Fish roast over glowing coals while fragrant herbs release gentle aromas into the rising smoke. Fresh water bubbles inside carefully shaped containers lined with animal hide heated by stones lifted directly from the fire. Simple methods, ingenious results. The child eats beside cousins and friends, occasionally glancing toward another nearby family who joined the fishing camp earlier that morning. Their language sounds slightly different. Certain words carry unfamiliar rhythms. Some gestures seem new, yet laughter requires no translation. Before sunset, everyone shares food. One family offers smoked meat. Another contributes dried berries gathered months before. Someone unwraps precious hazelnuts carefully stored throughout winter. The meal belongs to everyone. This happens more often than you expected. Early human communities did not live in complete isolation. Archaeological evidence suggests neighboring groups sometimes met seasonally to exchange goods, share information, find marriage partners, and strengthen relationships that helped everyone survive difficult years. Connection mattered, perhaps even more than possession. The child spends the evening playing with another youngster from the visiting family. Neither seems concerned that they grew up in different camps. Children solve such problems quickly. One stick becomes a pretend spear. A fallen branch becomes a giant mammoth. A pile of stones transforms into an imaginary cave guarded by invisible bears. The rules change every few minutes. No one complains. Watching them, you begin to notice something remarkable. The invisible mutation has already begun traveling. Not through magic, not through destiny. Simply through ordinary human lives. Families meet, children grow. Young adults eventually choose partners. New babies are born. Generation after generation, The hidden change quietly continues its journey, carried inside people who never realize they are transporting anything unusual. Evolution often travels this way, not with dramatic leaps, with ordinary mornings. An elderly woman begins singing while repairing a fishing net. Her voice is soft, almost blending with the sound of flowing water. One by one, others quietly join until the simple melody drifts across the river like mist. No instruments accompany them, only human voices. No one knows what the words truly meant. Even if we could somehow hear them today, their language has long since vanished. Some linguists believe the languages spoken by these ancient hunter-gatherers disappeared completely, leaving no direct descendants. Others think faint echoes may survive inside later language families, although certainty remains frustratingly out of reach. The song fades. The river keeps flowing. Evening settles across the valley. The western sky glows orange before slowly deepening into shades of violet and blue. Stars appear one by one above the darkening forest, while smoke from dozens of small fires rises almost perfectly straight into the calm air. Families gather close together. The child leans comfortably against a parent's shoulder, growing sleepier with every passing moment. Tomorrow they will continue home. Life will return to familiar routines. Another season will arrive. Another will follow. Nothing seems extraordinary, yet something extraordinary is happening. Not in this child. Not anymore. The quiet mutation has already stepped beyond a single family. It has begun slipping gently through the branches of an ever-growing family tree. No one notices. There is nothing to notice. Brown eyes still surround every fire. Brown eyes still greet every sunrise. Brown eyes still reflect every evening flame. The secret remains hidden, but it is no longer alone. Like the river beside you, it has found its current. It will continue moving long after every person gathered around tonight's fire has become part of the earth beneath their feet. And somewhere many generations ahead, another child will finally reveal what has been patiently traveling through families all this time. And Section 4. Morning arrives so gently that you almost miss it. A pale ribbon of light stretches across the eastern horizon, while the stars quietly surrender one by one. Cool mist lingers above the river, softening every tree into a grey silhouette. Even the birds seem reluctant to interrupt the peaceful silence. The child is awake. Only a few weeks have passed since that quiet morning when the camp welcomed its newest member. Life has already settled into familiar routines again. The hunters leave before sunrise. Gatherers disappear into the woods with woven baskets resting against their backs. Children chase each other between tree stumps, inventing games with stick stones and endless imagination. The little baby simply grows, slowly, patiently. Like every child before, you watch the mother gently lift the infant into the morning light. Tiny hands reach toward floating dust that glitters above the fire. The child laughs for the first time, surprised by something only babies seem able to see. Everyone laughs with them. Joy spreads easily here. No one knows this child will someday become one small branch on humanity's enormous family tree. That is the curious thing about history. The people living it almost never recognize it. You follow the family throughout the changing seasons. Summer brings long evenings, filled with insects humming above tall grasses. Wildflowers cover open meadows in soft shades of yellow and purple. The smell of warm pine resin drifts through the air each afternoon, mixing with smoke from the ever-burning fire. The child learns to crawl. Every journey becomes an adventure. A smooth pebble, a feather, a curious beetle climbing over a fallen branch. The entire world feels new. Soon come the first uncertain steps. They wobble, they fall, they try again. No one rushes. The older children simply wait nearby, smiling every time the little traveller stands once more. Patience is everywhere. Autumn follows with quiet confidence. Leaves turn shades of amber and copper before drifting onto the forest floor. Hazelnuts fill woven baskets. Mushrooms appear after cool rains, their earthy scent rising from the damp ground. The camp works together. Food must last through winter. You spend an afternoon helping smoke strips of venison above slow-burning wood. The sweet aroma fills the clearing while curls of pale smoke rise lazily toward the fading sky. Nearby berries dry upon woven mats beneath gentle sunlight. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest gift from the forest deserves gratitude. The child watches everything. Tiny eyes follow every movement. Little fingers reach toward unfamiliar tools. An elderly woman laughs softly before handing over a smooth piece of antler that has already served its purpose. It becomes the greatest toy imaginable. Children rarely ask for perfection. Only possibilities. Winter eventually arrives. The first snow falls without sound. One evening the forest is dark green. By morning every branch wears white. The air smells cleaner, now sharp enough to make each breath feel fresh inside your lungs. Footsteps crunch gently across frozen ground. Smoke rises almost perfectly straight into the still morning sky. Life becomes quieter. The camp gathers closer together. Long evenings are spent repairing clothing beneath flickering firelight while stories drift through the shelters like warm blankets. The child sits upon the mother's lap, listening to voices that seem older than the mountains themselves. Perhaps these stories have traveled across hundreds of generations, or perhaps every storyteller quietly changes them. Historians continue debating how faithfully oral tradition survived before writing existed. Some tales may have remained surprisingly stable for centuries, others likely shifted a little every time they were told. Maybe that is part of their beauty. They stayed alive because they could change. The child grows stronger with every passing season. Before long, tiny feet confidently follow older children into nearby clearings. Curiosity always walks a little farther than caution. Every interesting stone deserves inspection. Every bird feather deserves collecting. You notice something comforting. No one expects greatness from this child. There is no prophecy, no chosen destiny, no mystery sign. The child receives the same lessons every young person must learn: how to recognize safe berries, how to stay down while approaching deer, how to respect fire, how to listen before speaking. Most importantly, how to care for others. Survival belongs to everyone. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, you pause beside a fallen oak whose roots have lifted part of the earth into a tangled wall of soil and stone. Tiny flowers somehow bloom among the exposed roots despite their unlikely home. Nature enjoys quiet surprises. Perhaps people do too. The child climbs carefully across the enormous trunk arms, stretched wide for balance. An older cousin walks behind without saying a word, ready to catch them if needed. Trust requires very little conversation. As years pass, the child's face gradually changes. The round features of infancy slowly become those of a curious young boy. Or perhaps a girl. History never tells us. It does not matter. What matters is that the hidden mutation continues quietly inside every growing cell. Still unseen, still unnoticed. Scientists believe the original genetic change responsible for blue eyes likely affected neither intelligence nor physical strength. The child carrying it would have hunted, laughed, worked, loved, and aged much like everyone else. That thought feels strangely comforting. History is not always shaped by extraordinary people. Sometimes ordinary people quietly carry extraordinary futures. The evening fire burns brightly once again. Fresh snow reflects the orange light across the clearing, making the entire camp glow against the surrounding darkness. The smell of roasting fish mixes with cedar smoke while children huddle close beneath thick fur blankets. Someone begins telling a familiar story. The younger listeners already know every ending. They still lean closer. Good stories never become old. The child listens carefully too. Brown eyes sparkle with reflected firelight, exactly like everyone else. For now, because the mutation sleeping inside this family has not yet revealed itself to the world. It waits, patiently, quietly crossing one generation after another, like a tiny message folded inside a letter that no one has opened. You realize something remarkable. If you had lived here, you would never have noticed this child among the dozens of others growing up around the camp. There would have been no reason to remember one ordinary family more than another. Yet thousands of years later, millions of people may unknowingly trace part of their story back towards someone very much like this forgotten child. No songs preserve the name. No carving remembers the face. No grave tells the tale. Only DNA keeps listening. The fire settles lower as another peaceful day comes to an end. Outside the circle of light, snowflakes drift silently through the cold night air. Inside, families rest close together. The child curls beneath warm animal skins, completely unaware that one invisible gift has already begun the longest journey of all. Not across forests, not across mountains, but across generations. A journey measured not in footsteps, but in families yet to be born. Section 3. The night passes gently. The fire never truly sleeps. Someone always wakes before the flames grow too small, adding another piece of dry wood gathered during the day. The crackling continues through the darkness like a quiet heartbeat, reassuring everyone that warmth still waits nearby. You open your eyes before dawn. The air feels cooler than yesterday. Tiny drops of moisture cling to the fur covering your shoulders. Somewhere beyond the camp, mist rises from the river and slowly wraps itself around the trees until the forest seems to breathe. Everything feels familiar, almost comforting. The older hunter is already awake. He kneels beside the embers, rubbing his weathered hands together before stretching them toward the growing warmth. The lines across his face catch the orange glow, telling stories no words could ever fully explain. Around him, the camp remains asleep. Only soft breathing, only the occasional rustle of blankets. only distant birds preparing for another ordinary morning. Nothing suggests that this day will become one of the most important in human history, because it will not. Not for these people, not even for the child who is about to arrive. The first sounds come quietly. A woman steps from her shelter, pausing as another contraction tightens across her body. She does not cry out dramatically. She simply places one steady hand against a nearby tree and breathes with practiced patience. The older women notice immediately. Without panic, they move toward her. One gathers fresh water from the stream. Another adds more wood to the fire. A third quietly leads curious children away, offering them an important job collecting dry moss for bedding. Everyone understands their role. Birth is not unusual here. It is simply another part of life. You watch from a respectful distance. The morning sun slowly climbs above the trees, while birds begin filling the air with familiar songs. Smoke rises lazily through the branches, carrying the scent of burning pine mixed with damp earth. Time seems to slow. Hours pass almost unnoticed. Then, a baby's cry breaks the morning silence. Small, strong, alive. The entire camp relaxes. Several people smile. One hunter who had been repairing a spear quietly sets it aside before walking away to give the family privacy. Another child laughs simply because everyone else suddenly seems happier. Life continues. That is the remarkable part. No celebration announces the birth of a legendary ancestor. No mysterious light shines overhead. No elder whispers that destiny has arrived. An ordinary baby has entered an ordinary world. Wrapped inside soft animal skins, the newborn sleeps peacefully against the warmth of its mother's chest. Tiny fingers curl instinctively around a strip of leather. Small breaths rise and fall with perfect rhythm. Nothing appears unusual. The baby's eyes remain dark just as nearly every newborn's eyes appear today. No one notices anything different. They cannot. Neither can you. Because the most extraordinary event of the morning cannot be seen. It rests quietly inside millions of tiny cells, hidden beneath skin, hidden beneath bone, hidden inside a strand of DNA so unimaginably small that countless generations will pass before anyone understands it. At some point in prehistory, scientists believe a tiny mutation appeared near a gene involved in regulating melanin within the iris. Rather than creating a new pigment, the mutation simply reduced how much brown pigment developed in certain eyes. Such a change would have been invisible at birth. Invisible to parents, invisible to friends, invisible to the child growing up. History often behaves this way. Its greatest turning points rarely announce themselves. A single seed falls unnoticed before becoming a vast forest. One quiet conversation alters two families forever. A forgotten footpath slowly becomes a road traveled for centuries. The smallest beginnings often leave the longest shadows. You spend the afternoon helping gather reeds beside the river. The water glides silently around smooth stones polished by thousands of years of patient movement. Fish dart beneath the surface before vanishing into darker pools where sunlight barely reaches. Dragonflies skim across the current. The newborn sleeps nearby. Occasionally the baby stirs, making tiny sounds no louder than rustling leaves. An older woman gently rocks the child while humming a melody without words. Perhaps it has existed for generations. Perhaps she invents it on the spot. No one could ever know. Researchers continue discussing how much prehistoric music resembled later traditions. Bone flutes discovered across Europe reveal that melodies almost certainly accompanied daily life, although the songs themselves disappeared long before memory could preserve them. Only the instruments remain. The music drifted away. You imagine that lullaby floating upward through the trees, joining countless others that vanished into ancient skies without leaving even the faintest trace. Some losses feel strangely beautiful. As evening approaches, visitors arrive. Another nearby family has wandered into camp carrying woven baskets filled with hazelnuts and dried berries gathered earlier in the season. Greetings are warm but unhurried. Hands touch shoulders. Smiles appear. Children who have not seen each other for weeks immediately begin inventing games among the trees. The newborn passes gently from one careful pair of hands to another. Each visitor admires the tiny face. Each quietly remarks how healthy the baby seems. No one says anything about unusual eyes. There is nothing unusual to see. The fire grows brighter. Fresh branches crackle softly while sparks drift upward into the darkening sky. The smell of roasting roots mixes with fragrant herbs scattered across warm stones. Dinner begins. Stories follow. One elder points toward the stars emerging above the forest and traces familiar patterns with a slow finger. Perhaps those bright lights are animals. Perhaps they are ancestors. Perhaps they are simply lights. Different families likely imagine different answers. Anthropologists still debate exactly how Ice Age communities interpreted the night sky. Without written record, certainty remains forever just beyond our reach. The stars keep their secrets. The newborn sleeps through every story. Tiny breaths, tiny dreams, tiny heartbeat. This child may represent something entirely new. Not because the child will become a great leader. Not because extraordinary adventures await. Simply because an invisible instruction inside the body has quietly changed. It is almost amusing. Human history often celebrates towering monuments, powerful rulers, and famous battles. Yet one of the most influential changes in human appearance may have begun with a baby who never realized anything remarkable had happened. There is gentle humor in that thought. The forest grows darker. Owls replace songbirds. Cool air settles across the camp while people wrap themselves inside familiar furs. The newborn's mother smiles sleepily before adjusting the blanket around her child. Everything feels peaceful. The fire reflects softly in dozens of familiar brown eyes surrounding the circle, and among them rests one child carrying a secret that will sleep silently for years before the world ever notices. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not even during this child's lifetime. History can be wonderfully patient. Sometimes it waits for generations before revealing what began in complete silence beside an ordinary campfire deep within a forgotten forest. Section 2. The morning hunt ends not with triumph but with patience. You return to camp carrying only what the forest has chosen to give today. A few rabbits hang from woven cords. Someone has gathered armfuls of fresh nettles. Another person balances a basket filled with mushrooms whose pale caps still carry the cool scent of damp soil. No one seems disappointed. That surprises you at first. You come from a world where success often means abundance. Here success means everyone comes home together. A modest meal shared beside the fire is far better than an ambitious hunt that costs a life. The camp welcomes every returning figure with quiet smiles rather than loud celebration. Children run toward their parents, stopping just short of knocking over precious bundles of food. An elderly woman gently takes a basket from tired hands before placing it beside the growing fire. Someone immediately begins scraping rabbit hides with a carefully shaped flint blade. Nothing waits. Every task naturally becomes the next one. You kneel beside the stream to wash your hands. The water is so startlingly cold. Tiny stones press against your fingertips while the current carries away flecks of dirt gathered during the morning walk. Dragonflies hover above the surface, their wings catching sunlight in brief flashes before disappearing into the reeds. You look into the water. A familiar face looks back. Brown eyes. Of course. The reflection ripples before settling again, soft enough that your features almost disappear beneath the moving surface. This is one of the few mirrors you will ever find. There is no polished glass waiting inside a wooden house. No bronze mirror hanging upon a wall. If you wish to know your own face, you borrow the stillness of quiet water or trust the descriptions of those who love you. Perhaps that changes the way people think about beauty. You cannot spend hours studying yourself if the river refuses to stay perfectly still. Instead, your attention naturally returns to everyone else. The afternoon settles into a comfortable rhythm. Some people repair woven fishing traps using fresh willow shoots. Others smooth spear shafts with rough sandstone until each piece of wood feels almost silky beneath careful hands. Children collect fallen sticks, proudly dragging branches nearly twice their own height toward the fire. They laugh often. The sound carries through the trees like birdsong. A little boy discovers an unusually shaped stone resembling a sleeping bear. Immediately it becomes the most valuable treasure in the world. At least until tomorrow. One of the older hunters smiles quietly. Some archaeologists believe prehistoric children played with carved stones, miniature tools, and simple toys made from wood or bone. Very few survive the passing thousands of years, but scattered discoveries suggest that childhood has always found room for imagination. Play leaves little evidence, memories leave even less. You wander beyond the camp where berry bushes grow beneath scattered birch trees. The berries stain your fingertips deep purple. Their sweet taste quickly gives way to a slight tartness that lingers pleasantly on your tongue. Nearby, another gatherer carefully avoids plants that look almost identical. Experience matters here. Choosing the wrong berry could mean an evening of painful sickness. Choosing the right one means another safe meal shared around the fire. Knowledge is invisible, yet it keeps everyone alive. Historians continue debating exactly how prehistoric communities passed complicated knowledge between generations. Some imagine long evenings filled with stories. Others believe children learned mostly by quiet observation, repeating small tasks until skill slowly replaced uncertainty. Perhaps both happen together. Watching becomes remembering. Remembering becomes tradition. The breeze shifts. Fresh smoke drifts across the clearing, carrying the unmistakable aroma of roasting meat. Someone has already begun preparing the evening meal. Fat drips onto glowing coals with soft hissing sounds before disappearing into fragrant clouds that make every stomach quietly impatient. Even hunger feels peaceful. You notice an older man patiently shaping a piece of antler. His hands move slowly, deliberately. Each careful scrape removes only a paper-thin curl. Beside him sits a young girl watching every movement without speaking. Eventually he places the unfinished tool into her hands. She copies him, not perfectly. Not yet. The old man says nothing. He simply smiles and waits. Lessons do not always require words. Sometimes they require time. I begin noticing another pattern inside the camp. No one seems especially interested in standing apart from everyone else. Clothing varies slightly, depending upon whose hands stitched each hide together. Necklaces made from shell's teeth or carved bone reflect individual taste. Hairstyles differ according to age and convenience, yet appearance remains wonderfully ordinary. No one wakes each morning hoping to become more unusual. Survival rewards cooperation more than attention. You glance once again at the faces surrounding you. Brown eyes meet brown eyes. No one pauses to admire them. No one compares shades. No child asks why theirs looks different. The thought simply never arrives. It does not need to. Late afternoon sunlight filters through the forest in long golden beams that warm patches of moss beneath towering pines. Bees drift lazily between clusters of tiny white flowers. Somewhere above, squirrels argue loudly over hidden stores of food, sounding far more dramatic than the situation probably deserves. Some things never change. As evening approaches, everyone gradually returns toward the heart of the camp. The fire grows brighter. Fresh wood crackles softly as sparks rise into cooling air. The scent of smoke settles comfortably into your clothing, becoming so familiar that you hardly notice it anymore. Dinner is simple. Roasted rabbit, cooked roots, handfuls of berries, a few precious hazelnuts gathered weeks earlier. No elaborate feast appears. Yet every bite carries quiet satisfaction earned through shared effort. One child drops a piece of roasted root into the ashes. For a heartbeat, complete silence follows. Then everyone laughs. The embarrassed little face quickly breaks into laughter as well. An older woman brushes away the ash, hands back the slightly blackened root, and gently reminds the child that fire enjoys tasting dinner too. Perhaps that joke has existed longer than anyone remembers. Perhaps not. Darkness slowly gathers beyond the trees. The forest changes after sunset. Day birds fall silent while distant owls begin their evening conversations. Crickets create an endless, gentle chorus beneath the bushes. Somewhere far away, wolves announce themselves with long, haunting calls that drift across valleys before fading into night. No one panics. The fire burns steadily. Its warm orange light creates a safe circle against the darkness. You sit quietly watching the flames dance across familiar faces. Brown eyes catch tiny reflections of moving firelight, making every glance appear alive with flickering gold. Children grow sleepy against their parents' shoulders. Older voices become softer as stories replace conversation. The camp breathes together. You wonder whether anyone here has ever imagined another eye color. Probably not. How could they? You cannot dream about something you have never seen. The idea sleeps quietly inside the future, hidden within generations still waiting to be born. For now, this world remains beautifully simple. Brown eyes, warm fire, trusted companions, the smell of wood smoke clinging gently to worn animal skins, the reassuring weight of tomorrow looking very much like today. Yet beneath that comforting sameness, history has already begun preparing one of its smallest miracles. No thunder announces it. No bright light falls from the heavens. No wise elder senses what is coming. Time simply keeps walking, patiently, silently, toward a child whose tiny inheritance will someday change the appearance of millions without changing the gentle humanity reflected inside every pair of ancient brown eyes. Tonight you are about to step into a forgotten world, long before civilization where every night could be your last. Imagine a world where every face you recognize carries the same quiet pair of brown eyes. No blue, no green, no grey, only warm shades of deep earth reflecting the glow of ancient fires. It feels impossible now, surrounded by the remarkable variety of modern humanity. Yet for countless generations, this may have been the only world our ancestors ever knew. Before we step deeper into the darkness of tonight's story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more calming historical journeys. And before you settle in completely, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight along with your local time. It's always comforting to imagine this quiet campfire connecting people across so many different places. Now dim the lights and let the warmth of a distant fire guide your imagination backward through thousands of peaceful years. The first thing you notice is the cell. Not smoke alone, although smoke hangs gently beneath the pine branches above. There is damp earth softened by yesterday's rain, crushed grass beneath your feet, and the rich scent of animal hides drying beside the fire. Everything smells alive, everything smells earned. Morning arrives quietly here. There are no bells announcing the day, no voices rushing toward distant obligations, only the slow chorus of birds greeting the pale light creeping above the trees. Somewhere beyond the camp, water slips over smooth stones with the patient rhythm of a stream that has never known another purpose. You stretch stiff muscles after sleeping upon layers of woven reeds and softened animal skins. The ground is cool beneath your hands. A faint breeze brushes your face before disappearing into the forest. The fire still breathes. Red embers glow beneath a blanket of grey ash, waiting for someone to coax them back into bright orange life. One of the older women kneels beside the circle of stones. Without hurry, she feeds the coals dry twigs gathered the evening before. Thin ribbons of smoke curl upward, carrying the familiar scent of burning birch. Around you the camp slowly awakens. Children rub sleepy eyes while wrapped inside fur blankets. Hunters quietly inspect their wooden spears. Someone laughs softly after discovering that a curious fox wandered close during the night and carried away a forgotten scrap of dried meat. Life begins again. Nothing about this morning feels extraordinary. That is precisely why it matters. You have stepped into a time before cities, before kings, before written words, before maps, and long before anyone wondered why human eyes come in different colors. Here, survival asks simpler questions. Can you find enough food before sunset? Will the weather remain gentle? Will everyone return safely from the day's journey? Everything else can wait. You glance around the circle of familiar faces. An elderly hunter whose hands have grown thick from shaping stone tools. A young mother gently rocking her child. Two brothers teasing each other while sharpening antler points. A little girl carefully arranging feathers she collected yesterday, convinced they are treasures worth protecting. Then you notice something almost invisible. Every pair of eyes looking back at you is brown. Some appear dark like polished walnut. Others glow softly like honey caught in autumn sunlight. A few seem nearly black beneath heavy brows. Yet they all belong to the same family of color rich with melanin that shields delicate eyes beneath changing skies. No one notices. Why would they? To these people, brown is not one possibility among many. Brown is simply what human eyes are. Asking why everyone shares the same color would seem as strange as asking why rivers flow downhill or why smoke rises toward the sky. It is the natural order. Today, scientists studying ancient DNA believe that for much of early human history, nearly every person alive possessed brown eyes. The remarkable variety familiar today had not yet entered humanity's story. You know something they do not. Somewhere in the future, quietly hidden, inside a child who has not yet been born, one tiny genetic change will begin a journey that stretches across thousands of years. But that moment has not arrived. Not yet. For now, the forest belongs entirely to brown eyes. The hunters prepare to leave. They sling woven bags across broad shoulders and carry carefully shaped flint blades that shimmer faintly beneath the morning light. Before departing, each person pauses beside the fire. Some warm their hands, others touch the shoulder of a friend or family member without speaking. Words are precious. Silence often says enough. You follow them along the narrow game trail disappearing between towering pines. Fallen needles soften every footstep. Moss cushions, ancient stones. Sunlight filters through branches in scattered patches that dance across the ground whenever the wind remembers to move. The forest listens. Somewhere ahead, a woodpecker taps patiently against old bark. Farther away, unseen birds exchange brief calls that echo between distant trunks. Every sound matters here, every broken twig carries meaning. Your breathing gradually settles into the rhythm of walking. There is comfort in repetition. I begin noticing details that would escape hurried travelers. Spider webs sparkle with tiny drops of dew. Mushrooms cluster beside fallen logs. Fresh hoof prints sink into damp soil where deer passed only hours before dawn. Nothing feels wasted. Nothing feels separate. The people walking beside you know this landscape almost as intimately as they know one another. They remember which trees shelter edible mushrooms after heavy rain. They know where hazelnuts ripen first each autumn. They recognize the call of ravens warning that wolves may already be feeding somewhere nearby. Knowledge lives inside memory, not books. Historians continue debating exactly how large these hunter-gatherer communities usually were. Some may have consisted of only a few dozen people traveling together through familiar territories. Others likely joined neighboring groups during certain seasons before quietly separating once again. Either way, everyone mattered. Every skilled hunter, every careful gatherer, every storyteller, every child. As the morning grows warmer, the forest begins releasing the sweet fragrance of resin from sunlit pine trunks. Insects drift lazily above patches of wildflowers. A butterfly lands briefly upon your sleeve before floating away without concern. The world seems impossibly peaceful. Of course, appearances can be misleading. Life here is never easy. Winter always returns. Food sometimes disappears. Storms arrive without warning. Yet there is an unexpected calm hidden inside this uncertainty. These people cannot worry about distant futures they cannot imagine. They have today's fire, today's companions, and today's meal to seek. Perhaps that is enough. A curious thought drifts quietly through your mind. If every face surrounding you shares the same familiar eyes, would you even notice them anymore? Perhaps not. Perhaps beauty lives elsewhere, in a warm smile offered after a difficult hunt, in steady hands weaving baskets that will carry berries home, in laughter echoing across a riverbank as children chase each other beneath summer skies. Perhaps the color of someone's eyes simply belongs to the background of life, as ordinary as bark upon trees or clouds above the hills. No songs celebrate unusual eyes. No stories mention them. No child dreams of having a different color, because such an idea does not yet exist. Not in this world. Not around this fire. The sun climbs higher, filling the forest with soft golden light. Shadows shorten beneath ancient oaks. Somewhere behind you, smoke from the distant camp rises gently into the brightening sky, carrying with it the scent of home. You pause for one quiet moment. You look once more into the familiar brown eyes surrounding you. They hold kindness, weariness, patience, hope. Soon history will change forever through a single invisible mutation. But today humanity still shares one quiet gaze, and no one suspects the future waiting silently beyond the trees. Section 11. The years settle gently over the land. The forests remain, although they no longer stand quite as they once did. Here and there, small clearings interrupt the endless trees. Sunlight reaches patches of ground that had rested beneath deep shade for centuries. Fresh grass grows where towering oaks once stretched toward the sky. People made these openings, not to conquer nature, simply to live beside it. The new farming families have begun staying through every season. Their shelters feel different. Instead of temporary camps built for moving with the herds, these homes stand a little stronger. Wooden posts sink deeper into the earth. Walls woven from branches become thicker with layers of clay. Roofs wear bundles of reeds that whisper softly whenever the wind passes overhead. Nothing looks permanent, yet everything stays a little longer. You walk between the homes just after sunrise. The ground feels firm beneath your feet, packed smooth by countless quiet mornings. Smoke rises from several fires at once, carrying the comforting scent of roasting grain mixed with drying herbs. The smell is unfamiliar, but pleasant. Nearby a woman kneels beside a flat stone, slowly grinding dried grain into coarse flour. The rhythmic scraping fills the morning air with a sound unlike flint striking antler or axes shaping wood. Back and forth. Back and forth. It is almost hypnotic. A little boy watches beside her. Eventually she smiles and lets him try. The stone barely moves. He laughs. She laughs too. No lesson feels rushed. You realize something has quietly changed. Children are growing up surrounded by slightly different routines. Instead of following migrating herds across great distances every season, many now spend more time learning where crops grow best, how to repair fences, and when seeds should meet the soil. The pace feels slower. The seasons still guide life. Only the rhythm has changed. Anthropologists believe the transition from hunting and gathering to farming happened gradually across much of Europe. Some families embraced cultivation quickly. Others combined farming with hunting and foraging for generations before choosing one way of life more completely. People rarely abandon old wisdom overnight. They simply add new wisdom beside it. The blue-eyed family has become part of this changing world. Their unusual eye color no longer surprises neighboring communities. Children born with blue eyes play beside children with warm brown eyes without giving the difference a second thought. One afternoon you find two little girls sitting beneath a hazel tree. One has brown eyes, the other has blue. Together they are decorating smooth stones with red ochre, pretending each one represents a member of their family. This one is grandmother. This one is my brother. This one is you. The brown-eyed girl pauses. Then she colors one tiny stone with a streak of pale clay. So everyone knows. The blue-eyed girl smiles. Good idea. That is all. No mystery. No superstition. Just two children helping each other remember. Sometimes adults search for meaning where children simply see variety. The afternoon grows warmer. Bees drift between flowering herbs planted near several homes. Chickens do not yet scratch the ground here, but small groups of goats graze quietly beyond the edge of the clearing, their bells replaced by soft bleats carried on the breeze. The smell of warm grass mixes with fresh milk. Nearby, an elderly man patiently repairs a wooden fence. His grandson hands him pegs one by one. Neither speaks very much. The work itself becomes conversation. You notice the old man's hands. Scarred, strong, steady. The same hands once followed migrating deer through dense forests. Now they build something meant to remain standing through winter storms. People change, not because they forget, because they adapt. As evening approaches, several travelers arrive carrying polished stone axes unlike any you've seen before. Their blades gleam almost black beneath the setting sun. One of the younger villagers turns the tool over with obvious admiration. "How far did you walk?" The traveler points vaguely toward distant hills barely visible beyond the western horizon. "Far enough." Archaeological discoveries reveal that polished stone axes sometimes traveled astonishing distances through prehistoric trade networks. A beautifully crafted tool might pass from community to community over hundreds of miles before finally reaching its new owner. Objects travel. Stories travel farther. While everyone gathers around the evening fire, the travelers begin sharing news. A river farther south flooded beyond memory. Another valley has discovered rich deposits of beautiful green stone. Someone claims to have seen mountains whose peaks remain white even during summer. The children listen with complete fascination. One little boy whispers, "Do people live there too?" The traveler smiles. People seem to live almost everywhere. The answer somehow feels reassuring. The fire crackles softly. Fresh bread, simple, flat and warm, rests beside roasted venison gathered by hunters earlier that week. Old and new, together. No one insists life must be one way or another. The meal simply reflects everything these people have learned across generations. You glance around the circle. Brown eyes catch the firelight. Blue eyes catch it too. The flames make no distinction. Neither does the smoke drifting upward into the night sky. A young mother rocks her sleeping son. His tiny eyes remain closed. Across the fire, another mother gently brushes hair from her daughter's forehead. She notices the familiar pale blue eyes opening sleepily before bedtime. She kisses her forehead exactly the same way. Love has never cared about pigments. The stars appear slowly overhead. Without mirrors hanging inside homes, people rarely spend much time studying themselves. Perhaps they notice one another more instead. A smile remembered. A comforting voice. Gentle hands offering help before being asked. Maybe that is why appearance never becomes the center of life here. Character remains easier to see. Historians continue debating how prehistoric communities understood physical differences among individuals. Without written records, we cannot know whether unusual traits inspired stories, admiration, or simply quiet acceptance that every family looked a little different. The silence leaves room for imagination. You prefer the gentler possibility. The wind shifts. Fresh smoke carries the scent of cedar through the quiet village. Children drift towards sleep one by one, wrapped in warm hides beside softly glowing embers. Some dream with brown eyes. Some dream with blue. The dreams probably look exactly the same. Tomorrow they will wake together. Gather water together, laugh together, learn together. The world outside continues changing. More farming villages will appear. More families will meet. More children will be born carrying tiny pieces of every generation before them. Yet inside this peaceful clearing, something important has quietly become ordinary. Blue eyes are no longer a curiosity whispered about beside the fire. They have become simply another way for a child to look at the sunrise. And perhaps that is the happiest ending any new color could have hoped for. Section 10. The world begins to feel larger than any one family can remember. You notice it first in the stories. Each winter, as people gather around the fire, travelers speak of valleys beyond the mountains where rivers run wider than anyone in your camp has seen. They describe forests so thick that daylight barely reaches the ground. Others tell of open grasslands where wild horses move like flowing water beneath endless skies. Whether every detail is true hardly matters. The stories themselves become pathways. Children listening. Beside the fire, imagine places they have never walked. Young hunters quietly wonder what lies beyond the next ridge. The oldest people simply smile. They remember asking the same questions. The seasons continue their endless turning. Spring follows winter. Summer follows spring. The forest never rushes, neither do the people. One morning, however, something new appears along the southern trail. Not strangers, families. Several dozen people slowly emerge from the trees carrying woven baskets, sleeping hide. Children balanced on tired shoulders and bundles of carefully wrapped tools. They have traveled far. You can almost smell the journey. Their clothing carries unfamiliar scents of dry grass, river mud, and distant wood smoke. Unlike the forests you know, their sandals are worn smooth from many weeks of walking. The camp welcomes them carefully, not with suspicion, with curiosity. Fresh water is offered first. Then food. No one asks endless questions while people are hungry. That can wait until evening. As the newcomers settle beside the fire, you begin noticing small differences. Their stone axes are polished more smoothly. Their woven baskets use patterns unfamiliar to your eyes. Most surprising of all, they carry seeds, carefully wrapped inside leather pouches. Not many, only handfuls, yet they protect those seeds more carefully than almost anything else they own. One elderly woman opens a pouch just enough for the children to peek inside. Tiny grains, nothing impressive. Thing worth fighting over, or so it seems. You already know those little seeds will quietly change the world. Long before cities rise, long before writing appears, long before kingdom dream of borders, agriculture has begun spreading across parts of Europe carried by families who slowly move from one landscape to another. They bring not only crops and animals, but also new traditions, new ideas and new branches of humanity's ever-growing family tree. History rarely arrives all at once. It walks, very slowly. The visitors remain through the changing moon. Each day becomes an exchange. Your hunters teach newcomers where deer cross the nearby river during autumn. The travelers explain how certain seeds can be planted close to camps instead of gathered in distant forests. Neither way seems better, only different. One evening, you watch two elderly men sitting beside the fire. One has spent his entire life following migrating animals. The other has spent years tending small fields beside rivers farther south. They compare their lives. No argument, no competition, just quiet fascination. The hunter laughs after hearing how much work growing food requires. So, he says with a grin, the plants expect you to stay in one place. The farmer laughs even harder. And the deer expect you to chase them forever. Everyone around the fire joins in. Even history has a sense of humor. Anthropologists believe the meeting between hunter-gatherers and early farmers unfolded over many centuries rather than through one dramatic event. In some places, the two lifestyles existed side by side for generations, influencing one another in countless small ways. Small changes. Again, the same pattern continues. The blue-eyed family notices the newcomers no differently than anyone else. Some have brown eyes darker than fresh chestnuts. Others carry warm shades touched by amber sunlight. The familiar blue eyes remain uncommon, but they no longer seem entirely unique. The world has become too large for certainty. One afternoon you walk with a young girl from the travelling families. She kneels beside a patch of wild grasses growing along the edge of a clearing. Carefully she touches each stem. Then she points toward another cluster nearby. Those. Not these. You ask no questions. Instead you watch. She explains through gestures which seeds fall too easily, which stay attached until harvest, which make better flour. Knowledge grows from thousands of tiny observations collected by people who simply paid attention. The breeze carries the sweet smell of crushed grain mixed with fresh earth. It is different from the scent of the deep forest, gentler somehow, more settled. Perhaps this is what staying in one place smells like. Children adapt fastest. Within days, they no longer remember who belonged to which family before the gathering. Everyone chases the same butterflies. Everyone invents the same games. Everyone returns to the fire with muddy feet and impossible stories about fish that nearly escaped. Adults often draw boundaries. Children quietly erase them. One cool evening, the blue-eyed young woman sits beside a traveler weaving a basket. They exchange no common language, yet the work continues. One demonstrates a new pattern. The other copies it. Soon both are laughing after making the same mistake. Hands understand what words sometimes cannot. As darkness settles over the camp, someone begins singing. The melody is unfamiliar. Soft. Slow. Within moments, another voice gently joins. Then another. The words differ. The harmony does not. You wonder how many songs have disappeared into the night over thousands of years. Perhaps millions. Perhaps millions. Only silence remembers them now. Researchers still debate exactly how quickly farming spread into different parts of prehistoric Europe. Some communities adopted new practices eagerly, while others continued hunting and gathering for many generations, choosing the rhythm that best suited their land. History offered many paths, not one. Late that night, you walk beyond the firelight. The stars shine with astonishing clarity above the sleeping camp. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls once before disappearing into the darkness. The air smells of cooling ashes and fresh grass dampened by evening dew. Behind you, dozens of people sleep peacefully. Hunters, gatherers, early farmers, children who have never wondered why some eyes are blue. They simply accept what the morning gives them. You realize something beautiful. The mutation that once belonged to one forgotten child is no longer traveling through only a single people. It is quietly weaving itself into a larger human story. New families arrive. Old families welcome them. lives become connected. The invisible thread grows longer, not through conquest, through conversation, through shared meals, through marriages, through children sleeping safely beside the same fire. The flames burn lower. Tiny sparks drift upward until they disappear among the stars. Tomorrow, some travelers will continue their journey. Others will remain. The forests will change. The villages of the future will slowly appear. And with every generation, the quiet blue-eyed inheritance will keep walking beside humanity. Never leading it, never following it, simply becoming one more gentle color in the endless tapestry of ordinary human lives. Our Section 9. The forest no longer feels endless. Not because it has grown smaller, because you have begun to recognize it. The narrow trail beside the river bends exactly where you expect. The old pine split by lightning still leans toward the stream, its hollow trunk now sheltering birds each spring. Moss has quietly covered stones that once stood bare, and saplings have grown into trees strong enough to cast wide circles of afternoon shade. You have watched the land grow older. The people have changed with it. Children who once played beside the campfire now carry their own children upon their shoulders. New shelters stand where old ones slowly disappeared beneath grass and soil. Familiar voices have faded into memory, replaced by younger ones carrying the same laughter. Life never truly repeats. It simply rhymes. The blue-eyed family has grown too. Not rapidly, not dramatically, just naturally. A grandson here, a niece there, a cousin marrying into another traveling band. Every generation quietly carries the hidden inheritance a little farther than the last. One spring morning, several families prepare for a longer journey than usual. Word has spread that people from distant valleys will gather near a broad lake where fish are plentiful and fresh flint can be found along nearby cliffs. It is a rare opportunity. Good stone travels almost as far as good stories. The journey lasts several days. Each evening, the travelers build small fires beneath different skies. They sleep beside unfamiliar rivers whose voices sound just different enough to remind you that home lies somewhere beyond the horizon. The air changes too. The scent of pine slowly gives way to broad forests filled with oak and elm. Birds you've never heard before greet the sunrise with unfamiliar songs. Wildflowers bloom in colors the children excitedly collect into small bundles before they wilt. Everything feels wonderfully new. When the travelers finally reach the Great Lake, the shoreline is already alive. Smoke rises from dozens of campfires scattered beneath ancient trees. Children race along the water's edge while dogs bark excitedly at strangers who quickly become friends. Hunters compare finely crafted spear points. Gatherers proudly display woven baskets filled with herbs and dried fruits gathered from distant forests. The smell is unforgettable. Fresh fish roasting over open fires, crushed mint beneath countless footsteps, smoke drifting across cool water, the faint sweetness of flowering reeds growing along the shore. You realize something remarkable. No king invited these people. No road brought them together. No one collected taxes or issued commands. They came because people have always found reasons to meet, to trade, to celebrate, to learn, to remember they are not alone. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence suggesting that some prehistoric gathering places attracted people from surprisingly large areas. These seasonal meetings may have strengthened social bonds, exchanged valuable materials, and introduced new ideas that quietly spread from one community to another. Ideas travel lightly. So do families. As the gathering continues, you begin noticing faces unlike those from your own valley. Some people are taller. Others have darker skin from spending more time beneath southern sunlight. A few wear necklaces made from shells gathered hundreds of miles away, carrying whispers of distant coastlines no one here has ever seen. Yet conversations begin easily. Laughter sounds the same in every language. One afternoon, while helping shape fresh flint beside the lakeshore, you notice a young hunter from another valley, speaking with the blue-eyed woman you have watched grow since childhood. They kneel beside the same pile of stone. One demonstrates a different way to strike the flint. The other watches carefully before trying the technique. The first attempt fails. The second sends a sharp blade sliding perfectly from the stone. Both laugh. Knowledge changes hands before either realizes it. Nearby, an elderly craftswoman quietly smiles. Perhaps she has watched this happen for decades. New skills, new friendships, new families. History often grows from such ordinary afternoons. As the days pass, the young hunter remains close. They fish together before sunrise, gather firewood together before evening. Sit beside the lake after everyone else has fallen asleep, listening to frogs calling across the dark water. No grand speeches, no dramatic promise, only comfortable silence. Sometimes silence tells the longest story. You cannot help wondering how many human journeys began exactly like this. Not with conquest, not with ambition, simply with two people discovering they enjoy each other's company. Historians continue discussing how far prehistoric people regularly travelled in search of partners from neighbouring groups. Ancient DNA suggests that movement between communities occurred more often than once believed, helping maintain healthy populations across surprisingly large regions. The world was wider than it looked. Soon the gathering comes to an end. Families slowly prepare for the journey home. Bundles are packed, tools carefully wrapped, goodbyes exchanged with warm embraces rather than sadness. Everyone expects to meet again, perhaps next spring, perhaps the one after. The young hunter walks beside the blue-eyed woman as the paths finally separate. Neither says much. They do not need to. Several months later, the young hunter arrives at your familiar camp, this time not as a visitor, as family. No ceremony marks the moment in any grand way. Older relatives exchange nothing smiles and children immediately begin asking endless questions. Someone quietly prepares more food than usual that evening. The fire feels warmer somehow. Life simply expands. Before long, another child is born. You already know the quiet secret sleeping inside this growing family. But even you cannot predict what nature will choose. The baby's eyes remain dark at first, just as every newborn's do. Weeks pass, then months. One cool autumn afternoon, while the mother gently washes the child's face beside the stream, she pauses. The water reflects two faces, her own, and another pair of pale eyes looking back. She smiles, not because they are unusual anymore, because they remind her of home. You suddenly realize something beautiful. The first blue eyes no longer belong to one forgotten child. They belong to a family. Soon they will belong to many families, not because anyone sought them, not because they carried special power, simply because life continued doing what it has always done. People met, people loved, people raised children. Generation after generation, the sun begins setting beyond the western hills. Golden light stretches across the lake one final time before your memories return to the familiar valley. The evening fire crackles softly. Children laugh. Older voices trade stories beneath the first stars. Among the familiar circle, several pairs of blue eyes now catch the firelight alongside countless warm brown ones. Neither colour seems more important. Both belong. The forest has quietly accepted its newest shade. And somewhere beyond the next ridge, beyond the next river, beyond another gathering of strangers destined to become family, the journey continues, not through armies, not through empires, but through ordinary people carrying tomorrow inside their children. Section 8. The child with the unusual eyes is no longer the youngest around the fire. The seasons have quietly carried everyone forward. Small hands that once reached uncertainly toward drifting smoke now confidently gather kindling before sunrise. Little feet that stumbled across tree roots now know every winding trail between the camp and the river. Time changes people so gently that you rarely notice until one morning someone seems taller than your memory. The child's eyes remain different. They have settled into a calm, pale blue unlike the deep brown surrounding them. They are not dazzling, not magical, simply uncommon, and slowly, almost without anyone realizing it, uncommon begins to feel familiar. You notice something comforting. The questions become fewer. Visitors still glance twice when they first meet the young hunter. Children still occasionally compare eye colors while playing beside the stream. But curiosity has softened into acceptance. Life has a remarkable habit of doing that. The unusual eventually becomes another ordinary part of the landscape. The camp has more important concerns. A late frost damaged early berries. The river has shifted slightly after heavy spring rains. One family's shelter needs repairing before the next storm. Nobody spends entire days wondering about eye color. Dinner still matters more. So does dry firewood. One cool morning, you join several families walking toward a distant meadow where wild horses often graze. Mist clings low across the grasslands. Every breath carries the clean smell of wet earth mixed with flowering herbs crushed beneath careful footsteps. The hunters move almost silently. Children remain behind this time. They have learned that patience belongs to grown feet. Among the hunting party walks the young adult whose blue eyes once puzzled the camp. Watching carefully, you realize something important. The unusual eyes have changed absolutely nothing about skill. The young hunter notices broken branches, reads fresh hoofprints, listens for birds suddenly falling silent, moves with the same quiet confidence as everyone else, perhaps even better. It reminds you how easily people confuse appearance with ability. Ancient life rarely allowed such mistakes to survive for long. Competence spoke louder than appearance. Always, the hunt succeeds before midday. A young deer provides enough meat to feed several families for days. No one congratulates the blue-eyed hunter more than anyone else. Success belongs to the entire group, as everyone works together. preparing the animal for the journey home. The scent of fresh pine mixes with cool mountain air. Hands become stained with soil and tree sap. Leather carrying straps creak softly beneath growing weight. The work feels shared. So does the reward. Anthropologists have long believed that cooperation formed one of humanity's greatest evolutionary strengths. Small hunter-gatherer groups survived not because every individual was extraordinary, but because ordinary people consistently helped one another. Perhaps that was our greatest inheritance. Not eye colour, kindness. The walk home is peaceful. A pair of ravens follows from above, occasionally calling to one another in voices that sound surprisingly thoughtful. One older hunter smiles. He quietly tosses a small scrap far from the trail. The ravens immediately swoop downward. They always know, someone murmurs. Across many prehistoric cultures and even in later traditions, ravens often occupied a curious place between ordinary animals and mysterious observers. Whether they were considered clever companions, wandering spirits, or simply opportunistic birds likely depended upon the people telling the story. Either way, the ravens seem pleased. Back at camp, evening preparations begin. Smoke curls lazily into cooling air while strips of venison hang above carefully tended fires. Children help carry water from the stream. One little boy proudly drags a branch much larger than necessary. No one stop him. Everyone remembers being that age. The young woman with blue eyes kneels beside the fire, teaching a small niece how to weave thin willow shoots into a basket. Tiny fingers struggle. The basket collapses. They both laugh. They begin again. You notice the child studying those pale eyes with innocent curiosity. Will mine become like yours? The question hangs gently in the evening air. The young woman smiles before brushing a loose strand of hair behind the little girl's ear. I don't know. It is an honest answer. Perhaps the best answer. No one around this fire understands inheritance. They know children sometimes resemble grandparents. They know brothers often share the same smile. They know certain families grow especially tall or especially strong, but invisible instructions carried inside every new life remain far beyond imagination. Genetics waits thousands of years in the future. Tonight! Only families exist. The fire grows brighter. Shadows dance across familiar faces, while roasted hazelnuts fill the air with a warm, earthy fragrance. Someone begins telling an old story, not about unusual eyes, about wolves. According to the tale long ago, a lonely wolf followed people through an especially harsh winter. Instead of chasing it away forever, one elderly woman quietly left scraps of food beyond the firelight each evening. The wolf returned. Again. Eventually it stopped running whenever humans appeared. Whether the story describes the earliest friendship between wolves and people, or simply explains why wolves linger near camps, no one can truly say. Historians remain divided over how the first partnerships between humans and wolves unfolded. It may have happened many times in many places, rather than through one single remarkable event. The children listen with wide eyes. The young woman with blue eyes listens too. Firelight reflects differently within her pale irises. Not brighter, just softer. You'll begin wondering whether anyone remembers the first day they noticed those unusual eyes. Probably not. Memory smooths rough edges. Extraordinary moments quietly blend into everyday life. Perhaps that is why history feels so mysterious. The moments that change everything rarely seem important while they are happening. Later that night, long after most of the camp has fallen asleep, you sit alone beside the dying fire. The forest hums gently around you. Crickets sing from hidden grasses. An owl glides silently between dark branches before disappearing into the night. The smell of fading smoke settles comfortably into your clothing. Across the camp, families sleep peacefully beneath warm animal skins. Among them rests a young woman whose eyes would one day seem perfectly ordinary in parts of the modern world. Tonight they remain wonderfully rare. Yet something else has changed. Those eyes are no longer alone. Somewhere beyond this quiet camp, perhaps in another valley, perhaps beside another river, perhaps within another family descended from the same forgotten ancestor. A second child may already carry that same gentle shade. Then another. No trumpet announces their arrival. No storyteller records their names. History simply keeps breathing. One family at a time. One child at a time. One quiet campfire after another. The hidden mutation has stopped being a secret carried by a single household. Now it has become part of the slow, patient rhythm of human life. Like smoke rising through pine branches, like rivers finding the sea, like stories travelling farther than the people who first whispered them. Section 7. The morning arrives wrapped in silver. A thin blanket of mist drifts through the trees, softening every branch until the forest seems painted rather than real. Dew clings to tall grasses, soaking your feet as you walk toward the stream where the camp begins another ordinary day. Nothing feels unusual. That is what makes this morning different. Generations have passed since the quiet mutation first appeared. Parents became grandparents. Children became storytellers. Entire camps vanished into memory while new ones quietly took their place. The invisible change has travelled faithfully through countless families, always waiting, never announcing itself, until now. A young woman sits near the fire, gently rocking her newborn. The baby cannot be more than a few weeks old, wrapped in soft deer hide. The tiny face remains hidden, except for a small nose and rosy cheeks warmed by the morning fire. The mother smiles whenever the child stirs. The father kneels nearby, carefully repairing a fishing net damaged during yesterday's journey downstream. Life continues exactly as it always has. The older women gather around the infant. One softly brushes a finger across the baby's tiny hand. Another laughs because the little fingers immediately grab hold with surprising determination. Everyone offers quiet encouragement. Healthy babies are precious. Every family knows that. The child slowly opens sleepy eyes. No one reacts. Not immediately. The baby blinks once, then again. The mother tilts the child slightly toward the morning light filtering through the birch trees. She pauses, only for a heartbeat. Perhaps she wonders whether the light is playing tricks. The grandmother leans closer. She studies the child's face without speaking. Around the fire, conversation slowly fades, not because anyone feels afraid, only because something feels unfamiliar. The baby's eyes do not reflect the deep brown everyone expects. Instead, they appear lighter, much lighter. Not the bright blue that modern people imagine. Infant eye colour often changes during the first months or years of life, even today. But perhaps as this child grows, something unusual begins to remain where everyone expected darkness. A softer shade, cooler, different. No one has a word for it. How could they? Every language invents names only after people notice something worth describing. Perhaps the grandmother quietly compares them to the summer sky reflected in still water. Perhaps another person thinks of thin river ice beneath winter sunlight. Or perhaps they simply say, they're lighter. That is enough. No one gasps. No one declares the child magical. Real people rarely behave like legends. Instead, they become curious. Curiosity is quieter than fear. Throughout the following months, as the baby's unusual eyes remain, each morning the mother notices them while washing the child's face beside the stream. Each evening, the fire paints tiny reflections across pale irises, unlike any she has ever seen before. She grows accustomed to them. Love has a remarkable way of making unusual things feel completely ordinary. Visitors begin arriving during the changing seasons. Neighbouring families stop by the camp carrying baskets of hazelnuts and smoked fish. As always, children run together before the adults even finish greeting one another. One elderly hunter notices the little child sitting beside the fire. He pauses, smiles, then crouches until his face meets the child's. For a long moment, he studies those unfamiliar eyes. Finally, he chuckles. They see the forest just fine, he says, or at least something very close to those words. Everyone laughs. The moment passes. You find yourself smiling too. Human beings often respond to mystery with stories. Sometimes they respond with jokes. Both make the unfamiliar easier to hold. Historians still debate how ancient communities reacted when rare physical traits first appeared. Some researchers imagine unusual features attracted little attention within close families. Others suggest they may have inspired stories' nicknames or quiet curiosity. The truth has disappeared with the voices themselves. Only possibilities remain. The child grows. Summer returns once again. Warm sunlight spills across open meadows where butterflies drift lazily between flowers. Bees hum above purple blossoms while distant cranes call from marshlands hidden beyond the trees. The little child chases dragonflies, trips over roots, laughs after falling. Nothing about those unusual eyes changes the way small feet learn to run. The father teaches the child how to throw tiny sticks toward a fallen log. Most misses land nowhere near the target. Each success earns delighted applause. Skill matters far more than appearance. Always has. One afternoon, the child wanders toward a quiet pool beside the river. The surface is perfectly still. No breeze, no ripples, only clear water reflecting the sky above. The child kneels, leans closer. For perhaps the first time those unfamiliar eyes look back from the water. You wonder what the child thinks. Perhaps nothing. Children rarely spend much time admiring themselves. A passing frog leaps into the pool. The reflection shatters into dancing circles. The child laughs and immediately forgets the face in the water. Adventure calls louder than vanity. Nearby, the mother watches quietly. Her expression carries neither worry nor pride, only affection. To her, this is simply her child. Unique, beloved, entirely ordinary. Scientists now understand that blue eyes result from reduced melanin within the iris, rather than the presence of blue pigment itself. Light scatters inside the iris, creating the blue appearance our modern eyes recognize. The people around this fire know none of that, oh shit. They do not need to. The child laughs, the family laughs. The forest remains beautiful. Knowledge changes as this changes. Love does not. Autumn arrives wrapped in cool winds. Leaves swirl across the camp while everyone prepares once again for winter. The child now helps gather fallen branches, proudly carrying pieces barely larger than a walking stick. Every contribution matters, even the smallest. During one evening meal, another little girl from a neighboring family sits beside the child. She stares for a moment, then asks the most natural question imaginable. "Why do your eyes look like the river?" The child shrugs. "I don't know. Neither does anyone else." Sometimes the simplest answer is the truest. Night settles over the forest. The fire burns steadily while sparks drift upward to join countless stars scattered across the autumn sky. The child's unusual eyes catch both firelight and starlight in a way no one has seen before. Beautiful, quietly beautiful, not because they are rare, not because history will someday remember them, but because they belong to a child listening to the stories beside the people who love them most. Around the circle, every other pair of eyes remains warmly brown, just as they have for thousands upon thousands of years. One small difference now exists among them. Only one. It does not separate the child from the others. It simply adds one more color to humanity's long story. A story that has only just begun revealing itself beneath the patient stars. Section 6. Many years pass without anyone counting them. No carved calendar hangs from a tree. No elder announces the beginning of a new century. Time reveals itself in quieter ways. Children become hunters. Hunters become grandparents. The tallest pine near the river grows thicker than three people standing hand in hand. Fallen saplings slowly become soft hills covered with moss. Trails worn by countless footsteps sink deeper into the earth until they almost guide travelers by themselves. The world keeps changing, so slowly that no one notices. The family carrying the quiet mutation has become much larger now. Brothers have families of their own. Sisters have joined neighboring camps through marriage. Grandchildren chase each other around campfires that did not exist when their grandparents were young. Life stretches outward like the branches of an ancient oak. You begin recognizing familiar faces, not because they remain the same, because certain smiles survive through generations. A grandfather's gentle laugh somehow appears again in a little girl. A mother's calm patience returns in her grown son. The same curious expression passes from child to child long after the first owner has become only a memory. Perhaps this is how families truly travel through time, not only through bones, through habits, through kindness, through the smallest expression. One spring, several neighboring bands gather beside a broad meadow bursting with wildflowers. The meeting is joyful. Children who barely remember one another immediately begin running through the tall grass. Older hunters compare newly shaped spear points while quietly admiring each other's craftsmanship. Women exchange woven baskets, shells gathered from distant rivers, and handfuls of fragrant herbs collected from places unknown to everyone else. The air smells of fresh blossoms and wood smoke. Bees drift lazily from flower to flower. Someone begins roasting freshwater fish over glowing coals, while another family unwraps carefully stored dried berries saved through winter. It feels less like a stranger's meeting, and more like relatives returning home. Archaeologists believe seasonal gatherings like these probably played an important role among many prehistoric communities. They offered opportunities to exchange knowledge, strengthen alliances, celebrate, and perhaps most importantly introduce young people to families beyond their own camp. The future often begins with a conversation, or perhaps with a smile. As evening settles across the meadow, music rises into the cooling air. A hollow bird bone carved into a simple flute produces soft haunting notes that drift between the trees. The melody feels almost weightless, blending with the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. Children gradually grow quiet. Even the adults stop working for a while. Music asks very little, only listening. You notice two young people sitting near the edge of the firelight. They are speaking softly. Sometimes they laugh. Sometimes they simply watch the flames. Neither seems eager to return to their own family's shelter just yet. Perhaps they have met before. Perhaps this is the first time. No one interrupts them. There is a comforting understanding among the older generations. New families must begin somewhere. Not every important decision arrives during a hunt. Some begin beside a fire. Historians still debate exactly how prehistoric people chose marriage partners. Some community may have encouraged people to find companions beyond their immediate group, helping strengthen social ties and reducing close family relationships. Other traditions almost certainly varied from place to place. Human hearts rarely follow one rule. The seasons continue turning. Those two young people eventually build a family together. Their children grow, then their grandchildren. Without realizing it, the hidden mutation quietly crosses into another branch of humanity's growing family tree. Not because anyone planned it, simply because people fell in love. It is strangely ordinary. Modern stories often imagine history changing through great battles or famous rulers. Yet some of history's longest journeys begin with two people deciding they enjoy watching the same fire together. You smile at the thought. It feels wonderfully human. Years continue slipping past. The forests change. Warmer summers encourage different trees to spread across the landscape. Birch and pine slowly share space with the broad-leafed oaks and hazel. Birds arrive earlier each spring than the oldest people remember. The climate itself is changing. The Great Ice Age has already loosened its grip across much of Europe. Glaciers continue retreating northward, revealing fresh valleys, rivers and forests where people gradually establish new seasonal camps. The world seems to exhale. Families wander into places their grandparents could never have reached. Every journey carries stories. Every journey carries genes. One cloudy afternoon, you walk beside a young mother, carrying her sleeping daughter across a shallow stream. The water reaches only her knees. Sunlight dances across the ripples, while smooth stones massage the bottoms of her feet with every careful step. The little girl wakes briefly. She blinks, yawns, then falls asleep again against her mother's shoulder. Such an ordinary moment. Yet somewhere inside that tiny child, the quiet mutation continues its patient voyage. It has already crossed several generations. Still invisible, still waiting. Scientists estimate that many generations likely passed between the original mutation and the widespread appearance of blue eyes across ancient populations. Evolution rarely works according to human impatience. It prefers slow conversations. I begin appreciating just how slowly life moves here. No one rushes through childhood. No one expects immediate results. A tree planted today may shade grandchildren never yet imagined. Perhaps that is why patience feels so natural. Evening arrives beneath gentle grey clouds. Rain begins almost silently. Soft drops tap against leaves overhead before falling onto warm earth, releasing the rich scent that only fresh rain can create. Everyone gathers beneath simple shelters covered with hides and branches. The rain becomes its own lullaby. Children curl beside their parents. Dogs, if these early companions, already share the camp stretch comfortably near the warmth of the fire. Researchers continue discussing exactly when domesticated dogs became trusted companions in different prehistoric communities. Some camps almost certainly welcomed them, while others may still have relied entirely upon human senses. Either way, night feels safer together. The rain eventually slows. Outside droplets continue falling from branches long after the clouds have passed. Tiny pools reflect dancing firelight while frogs begin calling from nearby marshes with surprising enthusiasm. The camp grows quiet. You look around the circle once more. Every familiar face still carries brown eyes. Nothing appears different. Nothing appears remarkable. If someone from the future stood here searching for the first family whose descendants would one day have blue eyes, they would fail completely. There are no clues, no special markings, no mysterious glow. Only ordinary people living ordinary lives with extraordinary patience. Then somewhere many generations ahead, a child will open their eyes, and for the first time, the secret that has traveled silently through so many families will finally become visible. The forest is not ready for that morning. Neither are the people sleeping peacefully around tonight's fading fire. But history is drawing closer, one quiet generation at a time. Section TT. Now the story begins to circle gently back toward you. Not suddenly. Not with dramatic music or startling revelation. Simply as a river eventually returns to the sea from which its rain once came. For so long you have walked beside forgotten families. You have watched prehistoric children chase dragonflies through damp meadows. You have listened to storytellers speaking beneath roofs woven from reeds. You have stood quietly beside ancient campfires while smoke drifted into skies untouched by cities. The people felt distant, almost dreamlike, yet the distance between their world and yours is smaller than it first appears. One quiet evening, imagine standing before a still lake. The water is perfectly calm. The surface reflects the evening sky so clearly that it becomes difficult to tell where the earth ends and the heavens begin. You lean forward. Your reflection appears. Perhaps your eyes are brown. Perhaps they are blue. Perhaps they are green, hazel, grey, or a shade that changes with the light. Whatever colour they happen to be, they are carrying an astonishing story. Not because one colour is more special than another, but because every human eye represents countless generations of quiet inheritance. Behind your reflection stand your parents. Behind them, their parents. Behind them, an ever-growing gathering stretching farther than the imagination comfortably reaches. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then more. An endless procession of ordinary people, each gently placing life into the hands of the next generation before quietly stepping aside. None of them knew your name, yet every one of them helped make your existence possible. You'll begin imagining the faces, some smiling, some serious, some weathered by years beneath bright sunlight, others softened by gentle age. A young mother rocking her child beside a prehistoric fire, a father repairing a roof before autumn rains arrived, a grandmother telling stories while bread baked upon warm stones, a teenager nervously meeting someone who would eventually become family, an old fisherman claiming rivers remembered every face, the little girl who decided the pale stone should become the moon, the grandfather who always carried tired children home. Their names disappeared. Their kindness did not. Perhaps inheritance has never been limited to DNA. Scientists can trace genes. They cannot measure compassion passed from parent to child through example. They cannot sequence patience, or generosity, or quiet courage shown on ordinary afternoons when no one expected applause. Yet those gifts travel. Gifts travel too, sometimes more faithfully than eye color ever could. The evening breeze ripples the lake just enough to blur your reflection. For a moment, your face dissolves into dancing circles of light, then slowly returns, different, yet unmistakably yours. Identity has always worked that way. You are constantly changing. The child you once were has quietly become someone new, just as every generation before you changed the world in tiny, almost invisible ways. History rarely moves because of one enormous moment. It moves because millions of ordinary people wake each morning and decide to keep living. Researchers often speak about probabilities, inheritance, and genetic variation using numbers and carefully measured evidence. Those numbers are extraordinary, but perhaps they become even more meaningful when remembered alongside real human lives. Behind every genetic sequence lies a child who laughed. Behind every ancient skeleton rested someone who once watched birds crossing the morning sky. Behind every scientific discovery waited a family that never imagined they would still be remembered thousands of years later. The stars begin appearing above the quiet lake, one by one, exactly as they appeared above prehistoric forests, above the first farming villages, above travelers following rivers toward unfamiliar horizons, above every generation that wondered whether tomorrow would bring gentle weather. The stars have watched every chapter. They have judged none of them. You notice how comfortably silence settles around the water. There is no need to hurry, no destination waiting at the end of the path. Only another peaceful evening becoming part of a much older story. Across the lake, a family begins lighting a small fire. The glow reflects softly across the dark water. For one brief moment it looks remarkably similar to the prehistoric campfires you visited so long ago. Children still gather close when the flames begin dancing. Parents still pull blankets around sleepy shoulders. Someone still begins telling a familiar story. The details have changed, the feeling has not. Modern homes may have electric lights. Ancient shelters relied upon fire. Yet both became places where people gathered after long days to share food, conversation, laughter, and comfort. Technology changes. The human heart often changes much more slowly. You think again about the first child born with pale blue eyes. No celebration announced the moment. No prophecy predicted the future. No one imagined that scientists thousands of years later would carefully reconstruct the journey of that quiet mutation. The child simply lived, played, learned, loved, grew older, raised another generation. Perhaps that simplicity is the most beautiful part of the story. History did not require extraordinary people. It required ordinary people who continued showing up for one another. A mother soothing a frightened child during a thunderstorm. Neighbors repairing broken fences after heavy winds. Friends sharing food when hunting had gone poorly. Grandparents answering endless questions with patient smiles. The world has always been built from such moments, long before anyone wrote them down. A cool breeze moves gently across the lake. The stars multiply overhead until the sky seems almost woven from light. You close your eyes for a moment. The sounds become clearer. Water touching the shore. Crickets singing somewhere beyond the reeds. Leaves whispering quietly in nearby trees. A distant owl greeting the night. These are ancient sounds. Your earliest ancestors listened to them too. Perhaps not the very same owl, but certainly the same conversation between wind, water, and darkness. You open your eyes once more. Your reflection waits patiently. Not as proof of who you are, but as a gentle reminder that every face carries stories far older than memory. Some are written in genes, some in traditions, some in habits passed quietly across generations, and some exist simply because love has always found ways to continue. The lake grows darker. The fire across the water burns steadily. Above everything, the stars continue their endless journey shining, with the same calm certainty they offered to every generation before yours. And tomorrow morning, when you look into another pair of eyes, whether blue, brown, green, hazel, grey, or somewhere beautifully in between, you may remember that behind every glance rests one of humanity's oldest stories, still unfolding. Hand section 17. The story has travelled farther than anyone could have imagined. It began beside a small fire where smoke drifted upward into a sky untouched by cities. Now, it stretches across continents, across oceans, across thousands of quiet generations. Yet somehow it has never stopped being about ordinary people. Imagine standing on a gentle hillside as dawn slowly brightens the horizon. Not in one particular century, not in one particular country, but in many different moments at once. A shepherd opens the gate for a flock of sheep somewhere in the rolling hills of prehistoric Europe. Far to the north, another family launches a small wooden boat into calm coastal waters before sunrise. In a distant valley, children run between fields of barley while their grandmother calls them home for breakfast. Centuries pass, the scenes change, the feeling does not. Morning has always asked people to begin again. I begin to notice something remarkable. The descendants of that first blue-eyed child are no longer one family. They are countless families. Some continue living near the lands where the mutation first appeared. Others slowly follow rivers toward new forests. Some settle beside wind-swept coastlines where the sea becomes part of daily life. Others cross broad plains beneath skies so open they seem almost endless. No map marks their paths. No historian records each small journey. Most movements happen for ordinary reasons. A marriage, a better hunting ground, healthier soil, a river rich with fish, the search for a gentler winter. History often remembers great migrations. Life is usually made of much smaller ones. Archaeologists and geneticists now understand that Europe's population changed through many overlapping waves of movement over thousands of years. Hunter-gatherers, early farmers, and later pastoral communities all contributed to the rich genetic tapestry seen today. Humanity has never stood still for very long. One autumn afternoon, you imagine a young family preparing to leave their village. Their wagon is simple. Their belongings fit into only a few bundles. A child carefully carries a favourite carved wooden bird that has lost one wing after years of play. The mother laughs. "You packed that first?" The child nods proudly. It knows the way. Perhaps it does. Children often believe objects remember places. Sometimes adults secretly believe it too. Days become weeks. The family follows a river toward distant hills. They sleep beneath unfamiliar constellations. They meet strangers who become friends after sharing bread beside evening fires. Their children learn new words, new songs, new recipes. The old stories travel with them. The new stories join them. Nothing is lost. Everything grows. Far away, another family remains exactly where they have always lived. They repair the same stone walls their grandparents repaired. They harvest the same fields. They watch the same mountain change colors with every season. Staying can be just as meaningful as leaving. Human history has always needed both. One evening, generations gather around a long wooden table after the harvest. The oldest grandfather sits at one end. The youngest baby sleeps peacefully in a woven cradle nearby. Between them stretches every stage of life. Teenagers exchanging quiet smiles. Parents passing bowls of warm stew. Children arguing very seriously over who received the largest piece of bread. The grandfather chuckles. "I remember when your father argued exactly the same way." The room fills with laughter. Some family traditions require no teaching. They simply appear. You look carefully around the table. Brown eyes, blue eyes, grey beginning to appear in older faces. Hair ranging from deep black to warm chestnut. Freckles scattered across cheeks sun-kissed by countless summers. No two faces are exactly alike. Yet every smile somehow belongs together. Perhaps families have always looked like this. Different, connected, comfortably perfect. Modern genetics reminds us that every person inherits a unique combination of DNA from countless ancestors. No one receives a perfect copy of the past. Instead, each generation becomes an entirely new arrangement of ancient stories. You are not a repetition. You are a continuation. Winter eventually arrives. Snow settles softly across rooftops. Children press curious footprints into fresh white fields before anyone else has awakened. One little girl stops suddenly. She studies her footprints carefully. Then she begins stepping directly into her father's much larger tracks. Every step requires a tiny leap. She laughs each time she lands successfully. Her father notices. Without saying a word, he shortens his stride. Now she can follow more easily. You stand quietly watching. Perhaps that simple moment explains every generation that has ever lived. The older ones never walk the entire journey for the young. They simply make the path a little easier to follow. As spring returns, blossoms cover the orchards in pale clouds of white and pink. Bees drift lazily between flowers. Fresh green leaves unfold once more. Life begins again. Always. You realize that the descendants of the first blue-eyed child have now become so numerous that no one could possibly count them. Many no longer have blue eyes at all. Some inherited brown, some hazel. Some green as other genetic variations appeared over time. The original mutation became only one thread among countless others. That feels strangely comforting. History does not erase what came before. It simply weaves new colors into the cloth. Researchers often describe human ancestry as a branching tree. But perhaps a woven tapestry offers an even gentler image. Individual threads cross. Separate. Meet again. No single thread creates the picture. Together, they become something far stronger and more beautiful than any one strand alone. The evening sun begins lowering toward the horizon. Golden light pours across fields where children chase one another through tall grass. Their laughter carries effortlessly upon the warm breeze. An elderly woman watches from beneath an apple tree. Beside her sits her great-grandson. He asks a question every generation has asked in one form or another. What were people like long ago? She smiles thoughtfully before answering. They were probably a lot like us. The answer is wonderfully incomplete, and wonderfully true. They loved. They worried. They laughed until tears came. They carried sleepy children home after long days. They hoped next year's harvest would be kinder. They looked up at the stars searching for meaning, and without ever knowing it, they quietly shaped every face that would come after, including yours. The sun finally slips below the horizon. One by one lights begin glowing inside distant homes. Families gather for another ordinary evening, another shared meal, another story before sleep. The chain remains unbroken, not because every generation remembered every name, but because every generation cared enough to pass life gently into the hands of the next. How Section 16. Thousands of years pass, not all at once, not with the turning of a single page, but slowly as rivers patiently reshape stone. The village changes, then disappears. The wooden homes settle back into the earth. Their sturdy posts soften with rain until only faint circles remain beneath the grass. The fences collapse. The fields return to wildflowers. Young forests quietly reclaim forgotten paths. One century folds gently into another. The old oak eventually falls during a winter storm. Its trunk nourishes moss insects, mushrooms, and countless tiny lives before finally becoming part of the forest floor once again. Nothing is wasted. Nature has always preferred transformation over endings. The people are gone, and yet they are not. The children they once raised had children of their own. Those children travelled to other valleys. Some crossed broad rivers. Others followed coastlines where seabirds circled endlessly above grey waves. Generation after generation, families spread across the landscape carrying invisible pieces of one another wherever they went. No one realizes they are also carrying the quiet inheritance of those first blue eyes. Time continues flowing. Bronze replaces stone. Iron follows bronze. Villages become towns. Towns become cities. Languages bloom and fade like wildflowers after spring rain. Kingdoms rise. Kingdoms disappear. Roads stretch across continents. Ships learn to trust the open sea. Cathedrals reach toward the sky. Books begin preserving voices that once would have vanished into silence. The world grows louder, boozier, larger. Yet beneath every great achievement remains something astonishingly small. A tiny sequence of DNA passed gently from one generation to the next, never announcing itself, simply continuing, one centenary child at a time. Far beneath layers of soil-forgotten bones rest peacefully. For thousands of years, no one disturbs them. Roots slowly wrap around ancient graves. Rain filters quietly through the earth. Tiny minerals replace parts of old bone-preserving fragile details that no one intended to leave behind. The earth becomes a careful librarian, patient beyond imagination. Then one bright summer morning, many thousands of years later, something unexpected happens. Not treasure hunters, not soldiers, researchers. They arrive carrying notebooks instead of swords, soft brushes instead of heavy shovel, questions instead of certainty. The excavation begins slowly. Every handful of soil is removed with extraordinary care. Nothing feels hurried. A fragment of pottery appears first, then the outline of an old hearth. Finally, human bones. The entire team grows quieter, not because they are frightened, because they understand they are meeting someone who lived, someone who laughed, someone whose family once worried about approaching winters and celebrated generous harvests, someone who had dreams no written history ever recorded. The researchers kneel gently beside the skeleton. One brushes away loose soil from a weathered skull. Another carefully maps the exact position of every bone before anything is moved. Nearby, a photographer quietly documents each discovery, while another scientist records measurements in neat rows across worn notebook pages. The work feels almost ceremonial. Respect comes naturally. Modern archaeology is built upon patience. Every layer of earth tells part of a story, and disturbing that story carelessly would erase information that can never be recovered. The greatest discoveries often come not from dramatic finds, but from careful observation. The skeleton is eventually lifted with remarkable tenderness, not because the bones are valuable objects, because they belonged to a person. A quiet laboratory filled with gentle light, scientists begin asking questions the ancient villagers could never have imagined. How old was this individual? What foods did they eat? Where did they spend childhood? Did they suffer illness? Did they have relatives buried nearby? Tiny samples no larger than a grain of rice begin revealing astonishing answers. Within dense portions of bone and teeth, fragments of ancient DNA have survived. Against all expectation, the past has been waiting. Scientists carefully compare those fragile genetic sequences with thousands of others recovered across Europe. Patterns slowly emerge. Invisible threads begin connecting people separated by enormous distances and unimaginable stretches of time. One family links to another. One village connects with distant valleys. One and quiet mutation appears again and again and again. The researchers do not celebrate loudly. They simply exchange thoughtful smiles. Science often whispers before it speaks. You imagine one young researcher sitting alone late in the evening, studying lines of genetic code glowing softly across a computer screen. Outside the laboratory window, modern traffic passes beneath the electric lights. Inside, the past quietly reaches across thousands of years. That researcher realizes something extraordinary. Nearly every naturally blue-eyed person alive today carries traces of the same ancient genetic change, not because they belong to one nation, not because they share one language, because somewhere unimaginably long ago, one ordinary human child inherited a tiny mutation that continued traveling through generation after generation. The researcher leans back in thoughtful silence. How strange, how beautiful. The discovery does not separate people, it joins them. Millions of strangers suddenly appear connected through one forgotten branch of humanity's enormous family tree. You think back to the little girl sitting beside the storyteller, while rain tapped gently upon the roof. The young hunter skipping stones across the river. The grandmother remembering the grandfather who always carried tired children home. None of them knew, they simply lived. And because they lived, science can now tell their story. Researchers continue learning more every year about ancient populations through advances in genetics, archaeology, and isotope analysis. Each new discovery refines earlier ideas, reminding us that history is rarely fixed. It becomes clearer as evidence patiently accumulates. Knowledge grows much like forests. One quiet season at a time. As evening settles outside the laboratory, the researchers carefully return every sample to its proper place. Computers power down. Notebooks close. The room grows still. Somewhere beneath the same evening sky, children are playing in parks. Parents are preparing dinner. Grandparents are telling familiar stories. Few of them realize that inside museums and laboratories, gentle conversations with the distant past continue every single day. Not to prove greatness, not to discover heroes, but to understand ordinary people whose quiet lives shape the world without ever knowing it. The ancient bones have spoken, not with words, not with voices, but with something even quieter. Memory, the kind carried inside every living cell, the kind that waited patiently beneath the earth until humanity learned how to listen. Section 50. Morning arrives quietly wrapped in a blanket of silver mist. The village wakes one sound at a time. A wooden door opens with a familiar creak. Somewhere nearby, a rooster announces the dawn with complete confidence, whether anyone wishes to hear it or not. A dog stretches lazily before wandering toward the cooking fires, hopeful that breakfast might accidentally find its way onto the ground. The smell of damp earth lingers after a cool night. Fresh bread begins baking once more. Wood smoke rises in slow blue ribbons, disappearing into a sky painted with the soft gold of early autumn. Everything feels comfortably familiar, and yet, far beyond this peaceful valley, something extraordinary has been happening without anyone realizing it. The bones of countless generations are quietly returning to the earth. One by one, century after century, parents who once held children beside warm fires now rest beneath layers of soil. Hunters who crossed frozen rivers have become part of the forest they once walked. Farmers who planted the first fields have long since become indistinguishable from the land that fed them. Nothing about this feels sour. It feels complete. The earth has always known how to keep memories. You walk toward the old burial ground, resting on a gentle hillside beyond the village. There are no towering monuments, no carved statues, no polished marble, only small mounds softened by grass, a few carefully placed stones, wildflowers blooming wherever they choose. The oldest people visit from time to time, not because they fear forgetting, because remembering feels peaceful. An elderly woman kneels beside one quiet resting place. She brushes away fallen leaves with slow, gentle movements. A young granddaughter watches beside her. "Who is here?" The grandmother smiles. "My mother's father." The little girl nods thoughtfully. "Was he kind?" The question surprises you. Children rarely ask what adults expect. The grandmother does not speak about strength. She does not mention hunting skills or the number of winters he survived. Instead, she answers softly. "He always carried tired children home." The little girl smiles. "I think I would have liked him." "So do I." Silence settles comfortably between them. Perhaps that is how memory survives best. Not through dates, not through names, through kindness remembered by someone who never even met the person. Anthropologists have found that prehistoric burials often suggest remarkable care for the dead. Bodies were sometimes placed carefully accompanied by simple objects, flowers, tools, or pigments, reflecting affection, respect, and enduring social bonds rather than mere necessity. Love leaves traces, even after thousands of years. Later that afternoon, the village gathers near the river. Several young people are preparing to leave, not forever, only to join relatives in another settlement several days away. These journeys have become almost ordinary now. Families spread gently across the landscape like seeds carried by the wind. An older man embraces his nephew. A mother adjusts her daughter's woven cloak one last time. Children promise impossible things. "I'll visit every week." The adults smile. Everyone understands. Distance feels much longer when you are 8 years old. Before the travelers depart, the village shares one final meal. Warm bread, smoked fish, roasted hazelnuts, wheat berries preserved from summer. No speeches, no ceremony. Just people sitting together while the afternoon sun slowly drifts across the sky. The blue-eyed family sits among everyone else, not at the center, not apart, simply where they have always belonged. A small boy climbs onto his grandfather's lap. The old man has warm brown eyes. The child has soft blue ones. They spend several minutes comparing the shapes of clouds. "That one looks like a deer." "No." The grandfather laughs. "It looks like an old goat." Soon everyone nearby begins offering different answers. Within moments, the sky fills with the imagined animals. No one agrees. Everyone enjoys trying. Some games never grow old. As the travelers finally disappear beyond the distant trees, the village slowly returns to its familiar rhythm. Someone begins repairing fishing nets. Children race toward the stream. A young woman gathers herbs growing near the edge of the fields. Life moves forward without fanfare. That evening, you sit beneath the great oak once more. Its branches have grown wider since you first noticed it so many years ago. Or perhaps you simply notice more now. The bark feels rough beneath your hand. Tiny insects wander across its surface with patient determination. High above, squirrels leap effortlessly between branches that seem impossibly far apart. The tree continues living one quiet season after another. You begin wondering how many generations have rested beneath its shade. Hundreds, perhaps more. Every family believed their own worries were important. Every child believed summer would last forever. Every elder quietly hoped the coming winter would be gentle. Across thousands of years, human hopes have changed surprisingly little. Modern scientists now study ancient bones with tools those villagers could never imagine. Tiny fragments of DNA preserved inside teeth and dense bones have become quiet messengers from the distant past. They tell stories without speaking. They reveal family relationships hidden for thousands of years. They trace ancient migrations across rivers, mountains, and coastlines. And remarkably, they allow researchers to follow the same genetic change that first produced blue eyes long ago. The people themselves never knew. Their bones remembered for them. It feels almost is almost magical. Yet it is simply careful science listening patiently to ancient evidence. You imagine a researcher, many thousands of years in the future, gently brushing soil away from a skeleton resting beneath forgotten earth, not searching for treasure, searching for understanding. Every tiny discovery becomes another sentence in humanity's longest story. Not the story of kings, not the story of battles, the story of ordinary families, parents, children, neighbors, friends, people who laughed over burnt bread, people who repaired one another's roofs, people who carried sleepy children home beneath star-filled skies. The sun slowly slips behind the western hills. Golden light pours across the fields one final time before evening settles over the valley. Smoke rises once again from familiar chimneys. The comforting smell of supper drifts through the cool air. A grandmother calls the children home. Some arrive immediately. Others somehow discover one last game before dinner. That too seems timeless. You smile. History often feels impossibly distant, but perhaps it has never really been far away. Perhaps it has always lived inside ordinary evenings exactly like this one. The stars begin appearing overhead, one by one, just as they did for the first family who unknowingly carried a tiny genetic change beneath the glow of another forgotten sky. Their names are gone. Their voices are silent. Their homes have long returned to the earth. Yet something gentle remains, not merely the color of a few modern eyes, but the quiet reminder that every person alive today is connected to countless ordinary lives that came before. Lives that loved, worked, wandered, and rested beneath the very same stars. How does Section 14? The old forest still remembers, even as fields spread a little farther each generation, even as new houses appear beyond the familiar stream, even as children grow into grandparents and their own grandchildren begin chasing butterflies beneath the same ancient oaks. The forest remembers. Some mornings you leave the village before sunrise, following the narrow deer paths that existed long before the first field was cleared. The air feels cooler beneath the tall trees. Mist hangs quietly between silver trunk. Spider webs invisible the evening before now sparkle with tiny drops of dew that catch the first pale light of dawn. Nothing here seems hurried. The birds wake one voice at a time. A robin sings first, then a blackbird. Soon the entire woodland becomes a gentle conversation carried on invisible wings. You pause beside an enormous oak whose trunk is so wide that 3 adults together could barely reach around it. Its bark bears scars from storms older than anyone still living. Its roots disappear beneath moss so soft it seems almost woven. The tree has watched countless people pass beneath its branches. Hunters, gatherers, farmers, children, lovers, elders walking slowly with carved wooden staffs. Generations come and go. The oak simply keeps growing. You cannot help thinking that humanity resembles the forest more than it realizes. No two trees grow exactly alike. Some lean towards sunlight. Some twist around ancient rocks. Some lose branches yet continue reaching upward. Together, they become a forest, not because they are identical, because they belong together. The village itself has begun to understand this without ever speaking the lesson aloud. This morning, several families gather to help rebuild a roof damaged during last week's heavy winds. Nobody asks whose roof it is. The answer hardly matters. By sunrise, neighbors have already arrived carrying fresh bundles of reeds, wooden poles, woven rope, and simple tools polished smooth by years of use. Children proudly carry handfuls of straw. The loads are tiny. The smiles are enormous. One elderly woman directs everyone with cheerful confidence. No, the thick bundles first. You'll thank me when winter comes. Nobody argues. She has repaired more roofs than anyone can count. Experience speaks gently. The work becomes almost musical. Wood knocking softly against wood, bundles rustling overhead, friendly laughter rising between careful instructions. Someone begins humming an old tune. Within minutes, several others quietly join. The roof rises little by little beneath many willing hands. You notice something beautiful. No one receives special treatment. Not the strongest hunter, not the oldest elder, not the blue-eyed family, not the brown-eyed one. Everyone contributes according to what they can offer. A child carries water. A grandmother twists rope. A young man climbs onto the roof. Every task matters. Anthropologists studying early farming communities often find evidence suggesting that cooperation remained essential long after people settled into villages. Shared labor likely strengthened social bonds, especially during harvests, construction, and difficult seasons when survival depended upon helping one another. Communities survived together, or not at all. By midday, the roof is finished. Fresh reeds glow golden beneath the autumn sun. The family whose home was repaired insists everyone stay for a meal. Large clay pots simmer over steady fires. The rich aroma of barley stew fills the clearing. Someone slices fresh bread still warm from flat baking stones. Another passes bowls filled with roasted hazelnuts gathered earlier that week. The meal tastes especially satisfying. Perhaps hard work always improves hunger. While everyone eats, several children wander toward the nearby stream. Among them are 2 cousins. One has warm brown eyes, the other soft blue. They kneel together, searching beneath the shallow water for smooth stones. I found one, so did I. Soon they begin skipping the stones across the quiet surface. Neither notices that the colors of their eyes briefly mirror the river and the rich earth surrounding it. Nature seems to smile quietly at the coincidence. A little farther downstream, an old fisherman repairs one of his woven traps. His fingers move almost automatically. He has repeated these motions thousands of times. Without looking up, he begins speaking. When I was little, the children immediately drift closer. My grandfather told me every river remembers every face that drinks from it. The youngest child frowns thoughtfully. How? The old man shrugs with a smile. Perhaps rivers have better memories than people. The children accept the answer without hesitation. Adults might ask for proof. Children are often happier with wonder. The fisherman lowers the repaired trap into the gentle current. Tiny ripples spread outward until they disappear. Watching them, you think about families. One small action, then another, then another. The circles widen long after the hand leaves the water. Perhaps inheritance works the same way. Perhaps kindness too. As afternoon fades into evening, the village prepares for another shared celebration. The harvest has been generous. Not perfect. No harvest ever is. A few fields yielded less than expected. Some fruits spoiled after unexpected rain. A fence collapsed during summer storms. Life remains wonderfully imperfect. Yet there is enough. Enough grain for winter. Enough dried apples hanging beneath roofs. Enough smoked meat carefully stored away. Enough hope. Long wooden tables made from rough planks are carried into the center of the village. Clay lamps flicker softly as twilight settles across the valley. Children weave little crowns from late summer flowers and grasses, proudly placing them upon one another's heads regardless of whether they fit properly. Laughter echoes through the cool evening air. One tiny crown slips over a boy's eyes completely. He walks directly into his father. Everyone laughs, including the boy. Music begins. Simple flutes, a hand drum stretched with carefully prepared hide. Hands clapping together in steady rhythm. People rise, not to perform, simply to dance. Partners change naturally. Parents dance with children. Grandparents dance with grandchildren. Friends exchange places whenever someone grows tired. Among the circle, blue eyes occasionally catch the glow of the clay lamps. Brown eyes do the same. Neither color draws attention anymore. The dance belongs to everyone. Researchers studying prehistoric Europe believe communal gatherings likely played an important role in strengthening relationships within and between settlements. Music, shared meals, seasonal celebrations, and storytelling may have helped maintain trust long before written laws or formal governments existed. Perhaps civilization first grew from shared evenings rather than grand monuments. A year when the music has faded, and only glowing embers remain, you wander beyond the edge of the village. The fields lie quiet beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The familiar oak stands dark against the horizon. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls once before silence gently returns. You sit upon a smooth stone. The night feels comfortably cool. A light breeze carries the scent of harvested grain mixed with distant pine. Behind you, families settle into peaceful sleep. Ahead of you, the stars continue their slow journey across the heavens. I begin thinking about everything that has changed since the first child opened pale blue eyes beside a forgotten campfire thousands of quiet days ago. The forest changed. The homes changed. The ways people found food changed. Villages appeared. Stories multiplied. Children grew. Grandchildren followed. And yet, something deeper remained beautifully familiar. Parents still reached for their children during storms. Neighbors still repaired one another's homes. Friends still laughed over simple meals. Strangers still became family. The color of a person's eyes had become just one small brushstroke in a much larger painting. The painting itself was always humanity. Perhaps that was the true inheritance all along. Not blue eyes, not brown eyes, but the remarkable ability to welcome each new generation exactly as it arrived. The stars shine quietly above the sleeping valley. The old forest continues watching. The river continues remembering. And tomorrow morning, when the first sunlight touches the fields once more, another ordinary day will begin, carrying within it the extraordinary story of people who slowly discovered that what made them different could exist peacefully beside everything that made them the same. Section 13. The years drift by like leaves carried downstream. No one in the village notices how many have passed. There is no number carved into wood, no records scratched into stone, only memories measured by harvests, gentle winters, children growing taller and elders walking a little more slowly than before. You have almost forgotten there was ever a time when blue eyes felt unusual. That perhaps is history's quietest trick. It turns yesterday's surprise into today's ordinary life. The village has become larger. New homes stand beyond the original clearing, each surrounded by little gardens where peas climb simple wooden frames and herbs perfume the warm afternoon air. Goats wander lazily between fences. Dogs nap beneath the shade of old elm trees. occasionally lifting an ear before deciding the interruption is hardly worth investigating. The smell of baking bread drifts through the settlement. It mixes with drying apples hanging beneath roofs and fresh-cut wood stacked neatly beside every doorway. The entire village seems to breathe together. You spend the morning helping repair a footbridge crossing a narrow stream. The water murmurs softly beneath smooth logs while dragonflies dart through shafts of sunlight that filter between overhanging branches. Several generations work side by side. A grandfather shapes pegs. His son lifts heavy beams. A grandson eagerly carries tools far too large for his small hands. Everyone pretends not to notice. His determination matters more than his strength. The bridge slowly takes shape. No single person could build it alone. That thought stays with you. Perhaps humanity itself has always been a bridge, each generation adding one more piece before quietly stepping aside for the next. Nearby, the blue-eyed family has grown again, not into anything remarkable, simply into another ordinary branch of the village. One child inherited brown eyes from a parent, another inherited blue eyes from a grandparent, a third has eyes that seem to shift somewhere between the two depending on the morning light. No one argues over what color they truly are. Children have games to invent. Adults have roofs to mend before autumn storms arrive. Life continues asking practice. One afternoon, you sit beneath a broad oak while several children gather acorns. They quickly discover that not all acorns look alike. Some are large, some are small, some wear darker shells than others. One little boy proudly holds up the biggest acorn he can find. This one must become the biggest tree. The oldest woman nearby smiles gently. Perhaps. Then she points toward a tiny acorn lying almost kissed hidden beneath the leaves. Sometimes that one surprises everyone. The children scatter the acorns into separate little piles, trying to guess which might become the tallest oak. You cannot help noticing the quiet lesson unfolding before you. Nature has always loved variation. Not every flower opens with the same color. Not every bird sings exactly the same song. Not every leaf grows into the same shape. Difference is not an exception. Difference is one of nature's favorite habits. Modern genetics tells us that variation gives populations flexibility as environments change over many generations. The people around you would never describe it that way. They simply observe. Some goats climb better. Some dogs smell farther. Some children run faster. Some eyes are blue. The forest seems perfectly comfortable with all of it. Late that afternoon, a traveler arrives from a settlement several days away. His woven cloak carries the dusty scent of long roads. His sandals are worn nearly smooth. Tied carefully to his back hangs a bundle of polished stone blades wrapped inside soft leather. The village welcomes him with bread and warm stew before asking about his journey. Again, food comes first. Questions can wait. The traveler shares stories between slow bites. One in valley farther east has built houses unlike any he has seen before. Another community has begun keeping more sheep than goats. Far beyond the hills, people are trading beautiful green stones for amber gathered near the northern sea. Children gather close. Every distant place sounds magical. One little girl asks the traveler the question only children would think to ask. Do they have blue eyes too? The traveler pauses. He smiles thoughtfully. Some, and brown, many. She nods as though confirming something she already suspected. Then she runs away to continue playing. For her, the mystery is solved. The answer lasts barely 10 seconds. Sometimes the next game matters more than history. As evening approaches, several young people gather beside the stream to wash after a long day of work. The surface of the water has become perfectly still. One young man bends low to drink. For a brief moment, he notices his own reflection beside that of a friend. One pair of eyes is brown, the other blue. He laughs quietly. We look like brothers. His friend smiles. We probably are. Neither realizes just how close to the truth those words may someday become. Scientists now believe nearly all naturally blue-eyed people share one distant common ancestor connected to the original mutation. Of course, no one standing beside this quiet stream could possibly imagine such an astonishing family connection. Yet they feel it anyway, not through science, through community. The evening meal brings everyone together once more. The bridge finished that morning has become the favorite topic of conversation. Someone jokes that the goats will probably appreciate it more than the people. Another insists the dogs will acclaim it first. Laughter circles the fire. The bridge already belongs to everyone's imagination. The stars slowly appear overhead. A cool breeze carries the scent of harvested grain waiting inside storage baskets. Somewhere beyond the fields, crickets begin their endless evening chorus. The village settles into peaceful silence. You look around the circle. Brown eyes, blue eyes. Children who inherited neither parent's exact smile. Grandparents whose voices still comfort everyone nearby. Nothing about this place suggests that one eye color matters more than another. The people who thrive here share something far deeper. They know one another's stories. They remember who helped repair a roof after last winter's storm. They know which child always shares the sweetest berries. They know which elder remembers the oldest songs. Those are the things worth remembering. The colors reflected by the fire are simply part of the picture, not the whole picture. The flames burn lower. The children drift to sleep one by one. A grandmother gently pulls a blanket over two cousins sleeping shoulder to shoulder. One has blue eyes hidden beneath the closed lids. The other has brown. In sleep, there is no difference at all. The fire crackles softly. The bridge waits quietly beside the stream. And somewhere beyond the horizon, countless other villages continue building their own bridges. Between families, between generations, and between the countless small differences that have always made humanity beautifully, peacefully whole. And Section 12. One autumn evening, the rain arrives just before sunset. Not a fierce storm. Only a slow, steady rain that settles gently across the village like a soft blanket. Tiny drops gather along the edges of thatched roofs before falling into shallow puddles below. The smell of wet clay rises from the ground, mixing with wood smoke drifting from every home. No one complains. Rain fills the streams. Rain softens the fields. Rain reminds everyone to stay close together. You step beneath the shelter of a wide roof supported by thick oak posts. Several families have already gathered there, escaping the weather while waiting for the evening meal. Children sit in a loose circle. An elderly storyteller warms weathered hands above the fire. The flames flicker quietly, reflecting in dozens of familiar faces. Outside, the world grows darker. Inside, the village grows brighter. The storyteller begins without announcing the tale. No dramatic introduction. No grand performance. Simply a calm voice rising above the gentle rhythm of rain tapping against the roof. You know why ravens always watch people. The children immediately lean forward. Even the adults smile. Some stories never become old. The elder explains that long ago, before anyone remembered the names of rivers, the ravens borrowed tiny pieces of every human story. Whenever someone laughed, the ravens carried a feather of that happiness into the forest. Whenever someone cried, they carried that sadness too. That is why ravens always seem so thoughtful. They have heard everything. The children stare toward the darkness outside. Almost on cue, a single raven calls from somewhere beyond the village. The timing feels perfect. Perhaps the bird understands storytelling, or perhaps it is only lurking for the supper. Either explanation feels satisfying. Across many ancient cultures, ravens appeared in myths as clever observers, messengers, or companions between worlds. Whether these ideas shared common roots or developed independently remains uncertain, but the bird's remarkable intelligence almost certainly helped inspire countless stories. Reality often plants the first seed of legend. The rain continues, steady, comforting. One little girl quietly slips closer to the storyteller. She has bright blue eyes. Beside her sits her cousin with deep brown eyes. Neither notices the difference. Both become completely absorbed by the tale. The elder continues. The stars are campfires. Several children immediately look upward, forgetting that thick clouds hide the sky tonight. The storyteller laughs softly. Not tonight. More laughter follows. Only on clear nights. You find yourself smiling. No one here believes these stories because they expect perfect accuracy. Stories have another purpose. They make long evenings feel warmer. They help children remember lessons. They carry shared memories through generations that have never written a single word. Historians continue debating exactly how oral traditions preserved information before writing became common. Some stories likely encoded practical knowledge about landscapes, animals, or seasons, while others simply brought comfort after difficult days. Perhaps the best stories accomplish both. The meal is finally ready. Flatbread baked upon warm stones. Roasted onions gather from nearby gardens. A thick stew made from venison herbs and small beans carefully grown throughout summer. Steam rises gently from wooden bowls. The aroma fills every corner of the shelter. Earthy, warm, familiar. Children quickly discover that hot stew demands patience. One eager boy burns the tip of his tongue before anyone can stop him. His grandmother chuckles. The stew always wins. Everyone laughs again, even the embarrassed boy. Some jokes probably existed thousands of years before language found its modern shape. After dinner, people remain together. No one rushes home. The rain gives everyone permission to linger. A young mother begins repairing a woven blanket beneath the firelight. An older man carefully sharpens a polished stone axe with slow practiced movements. Nearby, two teenage boys compare hunting scars on their hands as though each tiny scratch represents an unforgettable adventure. Perhaps it does. Across the shelter, the blue-eyed girl and her brown-eyed cousin continue playing. They have discovered a handful of smooth river stones resting beside the fire. One by one they arrange them into tiny circles. This is our house. And this one is grandfather's. This is where the goats sleep. Soon an entire little village appears across the packed earth. A miniature world. Complete. Then the blue-eyed girl pauses. She picks up one pale stone unlike the others. What should this be? Her cousin studies it carefully. After a thoughtful silence, she smiles. The moon. Not because it matches anyone's eyes, not because it is unusual, simply because it is beautiful. Children often choose the simplest answer. You wonder how many modern arguments disappear when viewed through ancient eyes. Outside, the rain finally begins to slow. Drops continue falling from the branches long after the clouds have passed. Somewhere beyond the fields, frogs begin singing from pools of fresh water left by the storm. The village breathes quietly. You step outside. The cool night air brushes gently across your face. The smell of wet earth is stronger now, rich and comforting, carrying hints of moss, fallen leaves, and distant cedar. Clouds slowly drift apart. One star appears, then another. Soon the entire sky opens above the sleeping valley. The storyteller quietly joins you. Neither of you speaks for several moments. Words seem unnecessary beneath so many stars. Finally, the elder points upward. Our grandparents looked at the same sky. You nod. So will our grandchildren. The elder smiles, and they will tell their own stories. That thought lingers. Stories change. Languages disappear. Villages rise and vanish. Forests become fields. Fields become forests again. Yet every generation looks upward and wonders about the lights above. Some things belong to everyone. Scientists today know that eye color continued becoming more varied as human populations mixed across Europe over thousands of years. Blue eyes became only one thread woven into an increasingly diverse tapestry of human appearance. The people beside you know none of that. They simply know one another. Perhaps that is enough. You look once more toward the quiet village. Firelight glows softly through doorways. Families settle beneath warm blankets. Children drift into peaceful sleep, some with brown eyes, some with blue. Tomorrow morning they will wake before sunrise, carry water, bake bread, repair tools, listen to birds greeting another ordinary day. Life will continue exactly as it should. The rain has washed the air clean. The stars shine brighter than ever, and somewhere beyond the dark horizon more villages are quietly growing. More children are More stories are beginning. Without anyone realizing it, humanity is becoming just a little more colorful, while remaining wonderfully comfortingly the same. House Section 20. Now the fire has burned low. Only a few glowing embers remain breathing softly beneath a blanket of white ash. The lake has become almost impossible to distinguish from the night sky. The stars above and their reflections below blend into one quiet world where light and darkness seem perfectly content to share the same space. You have traveled a very long way, not in miles, but in time. You have walked beside hunters-gatherers whose names disappeared long before writing existed. You watched a child open pale blue eyes for the first time beneath a forgotten forest canopy. You crossed rivers with families searching for new homes. You listened to storytellers while rain whispered against woven roofs. You stood quietly beside early farmers as they planted seeds without realizing they were also planting the future. You watched scientists thousands of years later gently uncover bones that had waited patiently beneath the earth. And now, you find yourself exactly where every long journey hopes to end. Not with excitement, with understanding. The question that first invited you here seemed wonderfully simple. Why do humans have different eye colors? Science has given us part of the answer. Tiny changes inside our DNA inherited across countless generations gradually shaped the remarkable variety we see today. Blue eyes, brown eyes, green, hazel, grey. Each one reflects the delicate choreography of genes working together over immense stretches of time. Researchers continue discovering new details about these genetic pathways, reminding us that even familiar traits often hold deeper stories than we first imagine. Yet perhaps science alone is not the complete answer, because eye color has never truly been about color. It has always been about people, about mothers lifting newborn children into the morning light for the very first time, about fathers smiling as toddlers discover their reflections in quiet streams, about grandparents quietly noticing familiar expressions returning in the faces of grandchildren, about families gathering after long days to share bread, stories, laughter, and silence. Genes explain how, life explains why it matters. The first blue-eyed child never knew history would remember that quiet mutation. The child simply grew, learned to walk, learned to speak, probably scraped a knee while chasing another child through wet grass. probably laughed until tears came over something that would seem wonderfully unimportant today. Eventually that child became a parent, then a grandparent, then a memory carried only inside the lives that continued afterward. Perhaps that is the most peaceful thought of all. No one needs to know they are changing history. Sometimes living kindly is enough. You remember the grandmother who answered a little girl's question with only a few gentle words. He always carried tired children home. Of all the things that could survive thousands of years, perhaps kindness deserves the longest life. You remember the children who never cared whether eyes were blue or brown. The old fisherman who believed rivers remembered every face. The traveller who simply smiled and answered. People seem to live almost everywhere. The researcher who quietly realized that countless strangers were connected through one ancient genetic thread. Each person held one small piece of a story too large for any single lifetime. Together, they became humanity. Modern science continues revealing astonishing connections between people separated by vast distances and ancient time. Every new discovery reminds us that our differences are real, beautiful, worth celebrating. Yet beneath those differences we remain remarkably close relatives, closer than appearances sometimes suggest, closer than history occasionally remembers. You lift your eyes toward the stars one final time. They shine with the same quiet certainty that comforted prehistoric families long before cities filled the horizon. The stars have watched children become parents, parents become grandparents, civilize and rise. Languages disappear, forests become fields, fields become forests again, empires arrive, empires fade. Still, every night someone somewhere looks upward with the same quiet wonder. That continuity feels comforting. You realize something almost impossible to measure. Although thousands of years separate your world from that first forgotten campfire, the distance between human hearts may be much smaller. People still celebrate new babies, still worry during difficult seasons, still hope tomorrow brings good news, still gather around warm meals after long days, still tell stories before sleep. Technology has transformed nearly every part of daily life. Love has remained wonderfully recognizable. The breeze carries the faint scent of pine mixed with cool night air. Somewhere nearby water gently touches the shore. Crickets continue their endless evening song. An owl glides silently overhead before disappearing into darkness. The world has become very quiet, exactly as bedtime stories prefer. If you could somehow visit that first family, the one who unknowingly carried the tiny mutation that began this journey, you might expect them to seem unimaginably different. Instead, you would probably recognize them immediately, not because of their clothing, not because of their homes, because of the way a parent instinctively reaches for a sleepy child, because friends laugh together after sharing food, because grandparents smile while watching younger generations play, because ordinary love has always looked remarkably familiar. Perhaps that has been the true inheritance all along, not blue eyes, not brown eyes, but the gentle habit of caring for one another across every generation. And now, before this peaceful evening comes to its close, take one last slow look at the night sky in your imagination. Somewhere beyond the stars, beyond the centuries, beyond every forgotten village and every ancient forest, lives a chain of ordinary people stretching back farther than memory. They never knew your name, yet each quietly passed the gift of life onward until eventually it reached you. And one day, whether through family friendship, kindness, teaching, creativity, or simple compassion, something of your own life will continue into someone else's story. Not because history demands greatness, but because humanity has always been built from ordinary moments shared generously. The embers finally fade into darkness. The lake grows still. The stars continue their endless journey above a sleeping world. Thank you for walking so gently through this forgotten chapter of our shared past. May your dreams be as peaceful as those ancient evenings beside the first campfires, where every pair of eyes, brown, blue, green, hazel, grey, and every beautiful shade between, looked towards tomorrow with the very same quiet hope. Good night. Section 19. The night has become wonderfully quiet. The lake lies almost perfectly still, now disturbed only by the occasional ripple from a fish rising briefly beneath the moonlight. The small fire across the shore has settled into glowing embers, casting a soft amber light that seems less like illumination and more like memory itself. You sit comfortably. There is nowhere else you need to be. For thousands of years, countless people ended their evenings just like this. Not with urgency, not with endless distractions, simply watching darkness arrive one gentle moment after another. The stars wheel slowly overhead. They are moving, although you can barely notice. History often behaves the same way. Its greatest changes rarely announce themselves. They unfold so gradually that only thousands of years reveal the full picture. You think once more about that first quiet mutation, a tiny alteration in the instructions carried inside one child. Invisible, harmless, almost unimaginably small. Had it disappeared after a single generation, no one would ever have known it existed. Instead, it remained, not because it was trying to change humanity, not because nature had chosen a winner, simply because life continued. Children were born, families grew, communities welcomed newcomers, neighbors shared food, friends fell in love. The mutation traveled wherever ordinary people carried it. That may be the gentlest lesson evolution offers. Most lasting changes are not driven by intention. They are carried by life itself. Modern evolutionary biology reminds us that many genetic changes spread through populations without making people dramatically stronger or weaker. Some persist through a combination of inheritance, migration, population history, and chance rather than through obvious survival advantages alone. Chance has always walked beside necessity. The two are old companions. A soft breeze stirs the reeds at the edge of the lake. Their quiet rustling reminds you of whispers exchanged around ancient fires. How many conversations have disappeared into the night? Millions, perhaps billions. Parents comforting frightened children during storms. Friends teasing one another after a long day's work. Grandparents repeating stories everyone already knew but loved hearing again. The words vanished. The people did not. Pieces of them continue living inside every generation that followed. A young couple strolls slowly along the lakeshore. They are talking so quietly that only laughter occasionally reaches you across the still water. Soon they stop. The woman points toward the stars. The man looks upward. Neither seems in any hurry to explain the constellations. Some things are beautiful without being fully understood. Just as they turn to walk home, a little girl comes running toward them from the nearby path. She has been searching for smooth stones before bedtime. With complete seriousness, she opens both hands. I found 5. Her father crouches beside her. Which one is your favorite? She studies them carefully. One is pale grey. One almost black. Another carries tiny sparkling crystals. Finally, she chooses the smallest one of all. This one. Why? It feels friendly, Fee. Her parents smile. No further explanation is needed. Children often trust feelings before words. You remember the little girl from long ago who decided the pale stone should become the moon. Thousands of years separate the two children. Their curiosity feels exactly the same. History changes clothing. It rarely changes wonder. The moon rises higher. Its gentle light stretches across the lake like a silver pathway leading somewhere beyond sight. You imagine all the people who have looked upon this same moon. The prehistoric child discovering blue eyes reflected in quiet water. The first farmers tending young crops beneath spring skies. Travelers following rivers through unfamiliar valleys. Storytellers keeping children awake just a little longer with one final tale. Scientists brushing soil from ancient bones. Parents today watching sleepy children drift peacefully to sleep. Every one of them shared this moon, not at the same time, but beneath the same patient sky. Astronomers remind us that although the stars slowly shift over immense stretches of time, many of the constellations recognizable today would also have been familiar to people living thousands of years ago. The heavens have always offered continuity. Perhaps that is why they comfort us. The fire across the lake finally fades. Only a few glowing coals remain, yet somehow the darkness never feels empty. The night is full of quiet breathing, full of unseen animals moving gently through the grass, full of memories carried across generations. You realize something that has been slowly unfolding throughout this entire journey. The story was never truly about Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes simply gave us a path to follow. The real story has always been about humanity itself, about ordinary lives connected by invisible threads, about how the smallest changes can accompany the greatest journeys, about how every generation quietly receives the world from those before and gently passes it onward. The first blue-eyed child did not transform humanity. Humanity embraced the child. That may be the more remarkable achievement. Communities adapted, families loved, children accepted what adults sometimes questioned. Life made room for something new without losing what had always been there. Perhaps that quiet generosity is one of our oldest inheritances. A shooting star crosses the sky. Gone almost before you notice it. You smile. Some moments are beautiful precisely because they are brief. Others, like the tiny genetic change that began this story, continue for thousands of years. Researchers often describe human history as a network rather than a straight line. Families separate and reunite. Communities exchange ideas. Genes mix. Languages evolve. Traditions borrow from one another. The result is not a single story. It is millions of stories gently woven together. You look once more across the calm water. Your own reflection is almost invisible now. The stars shine more brightly than your face. There is something comforting about that. It reminds you that every individual belongs to something much larger, not something that diminishes who they are. something that gives each life its place. Every ancestor once wondered about tomorrow. Every descendant benefits from hopes planted long before they were born. You think of the old fisherman who believed rivers remembered every face. Perhaps he was right after all. Not because rivers possess memories like people, but because the world quietly carries traces of everyone who has loved it. The fields remember footsteps. The forests remember voices. The stones remember patient hands. The earth remembers bones. And within every living person, life remembers itself. The breeze grows cooler. Night deepens. Somewhere behind you, a familiar voice gently calls a child inside for sleep. The child answers, "Just one more minute." Across thousands of years, some conversations never change. You quietly laugh. Then you let the peaceful silence return.